I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, September 25th, 2018. And the first item of business today is a public hearing and order and resolution for 1809-2501, which is in the matter of adopting the fiscal year 1819 Supplemental Budget Number 1, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations. And we have Christine Moody here to explain what we're voting on this morning. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Chair Bozovich, board members. So as you mentioned, this is the first supplemental budget of fiscal year 1819. The total appropriation changes in the budget are $4.2 million. We are adding 15.6 FTE across all of our funds, and I'll point out a few of those to you. Typically, these supplementals that come to the board will contain items that the board has already decided on, but they need some kind of budget legal action. So there are a couple items for that, including the addition of a Dewey investigator in the district attorney's office. That has been talked about in front of the board. It's due to grant revenue, but this is adding that FTE. So that position can be filled. Also a movement of transient room tax over to parks. That was discussed recently for their parks master plan to finish that piece up. Then there are a few items that are maybe new to the board in that we're a couple I'll point out. We're adding 5 FTE in Health and Human Services. That is going to be paid for with some of the marijuana revenue that comes from the state directly to Health and Human Services. It's part of the 20% that is has to be used for alcohol and drug abuse prevention, early intervention. And so they're adding 3 FTE in public health and 2 in youth services. At this point, that is going to be funded with the revenue they received last year. So about $900,000 that they received last year. And then there's an expense of $5,000 in the benefit fund to pay for implementation of the tobacco-free campus that has been talked about at the board level recently. And then another example is a road project out at the solid waste field, just putting in, the contract came in a little bit higher than they had originally predicted, so putting in about $190,000 to pay for that contract. So unless you have any other questions on any items, that is the summary that I have for you.
Any questions from the board before I open the public hearing? Then I'll open the public hearing on the supplemental budget number 1 for fiscal year 1819. Is there anyone signed up? Is there anyone that would like to address the board about the supplemental budget? Seeing none, then I will close the public hearing on the supplemental budget and move to board discussion and or motion. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of order resolution 1809-2501, the matter of adopting the FY 1819 supplemental budget number 1, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the supplemental budget number 1. Discussion to the motion.
Just a quick
Commissioner
question,
Farr.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Medical marijuana money from the state.
Correct.
Can you say out loud about how much that might be?
The money that we're talking about here for Health and Human
Yes.
Services was about $910,000 that they received last year. Right, that was the first money that they received. That is, I will note that that's more than an annual amount because it took the state quite a while to start funneling that money down to local governments. So that's probably about a year and a half worth, and the tax rate changed during that period. So just to give some context to the number.
But it's safe to say it's not a massive windfall of hidden funds from marijuana sales.
Correct.
Thank you.
And in particular, most of that is from the 20% share of taxation that is dedicated for addiction treatment and prevention.
All of that number that I just said is
Okay.
right. There is other
That's
revenue
not the
received
local
into the
revenue.
general fund. Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Yeah. So just, it's not something that's fungible for any other use. So with that, any further discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Christine. So with that, we're down to adjustments to the agenda, and I will remind commissioners that we have 2 time certains this morning and an exec session to get through, so it's pretty tight this morning. Any other adjustments to the agenda this morning? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comments. Diana? Looks like we have a couple people signed up for public comment. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board if you'll state your name and where you live generally before you start your comments, and then I'll start the timer after you've given your name and residence. So the first person signed up to speak is Jerry Ritter.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jerry Ritter, 1865 Yolanda in unincorporated Lane County, North Springfield, UGB. About 3 weeks ago, I sent each of you an email proposing an amendment to Lane County Code Chapter 7, Section 115, which is the nuisance animal ordinance. For the record, today I'm just representing myself and a few of my neighbors. On multiple occasions during the 40 years I've lived in my neighborhood, we have had to deal with irresponsible neighbors who have barking dogs day and night. Some of these situations have been resolved amicably, others have not. In one case, the dogs had to be impounded. We have another situation that has just developed. Excuse me. Specific proposal is to add language to this code from the Multnomah County Animal Ordinance to bring it in compliance, not the word I want, but to provide citizens with additional resource in dealing with nuisance animals. The current ordinance code reads continuous annoyance, and it allows 15 minutes at any time of day for repeated barking, whining, screeching, braying, howling, or other like sounds.
Wow, we're in compliance then.
You guys are in good shape.
So far.
Especially since you've only allowed me 3 minutes, I'm good. Now, the word continuous, I've been involved in amending legislation where one word or one phrase can be a problem in interpretation. What is continuous? Say the dog barks for 7 minutes and then takes a 30-second break and starts in again. Is that continuous or is it not? The Multnomah County ordinance goes a little bit beyond that, and what it allows is it does not allow more than 10 minutes or repeated episodes of intermittent noise lasting for a minimum period of 30 minutes. So it gives the people a bit more recourse in dealing and further clarifies continuous that is not the only option. So I have hard copies here of the proposal, but specifically what I would like to do or would propose that you do is make this adjustment to 7115 to state an animal owner who fails to control any animal that causes annoyance, alarm, or noise disturbance for more than 15 minutes or repeated episodes of intermittent noise lasting for a minimum period of 30 minutes at any time of the day or night, be it repeated barking, whining, screeching, yada, yada. And that is a Class C violation. I have hard copies here if you would like that. It was proposed that I bring this down and present it in person, so that's what I'm doing today.
Thank you, Jerry. If you want to just pass your hard copy to Pat, he can pass them down to us.
I can do that.
I'm Pat.
Yeah.
Or maybe it says that up there.
Commissioner Farr, sorry.
Good to see you, Jerry. Thank you.
And I did pause your timer for a while, seeing you got interrupted there.
Oh, not a problem, but thank you, gentlemen.
Not by brain.
Maybe whining, I don't know.
Whining, maybe.
Thank you. So the next person signed up to speak is Linda Voigt, or Vogt? Rhodey, sorry. Roddy.
There you go.
Obviously, Commissioner Williams knows you, so
Yes.
go ahead,
my
Linda.
Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Linda Roddy Vaught. I'm here to speak about the proposed Sears Road Safety Project. Apparently, you have not been given the final proposal that committee has made up. But last week, I attended the Traffic Advisory Committee meeting held at the Lane County Public Works location in Eugene, and I was disturbed to find that District 5, East Lane County, did not have a representation on the committee when the topic of the meeting was about Sears Road, which is located in East Lane County. So I want to read to you my comments that I gave to them before I finish my comments to you. I wanted to give them some history about Sears Road. Our grandparents purchased 10 acres along Sears Road in 1945. The location was the original farmhouse in that valley, which went on the Lane County tax rolls in 1900, 118 years ago. At that time, Sears Road was a narrow gravel road. At the end of the driveway are two original cement gate pillars. They were what we consider to be historical landmarks, as they still show the name of the original landowner, initial C.A. King Ranch. Due to the numerous speeding vehicles on Sears Road, we have our own safety moved the gate up further the driveway so we can pull off the road and park to open our gate. For a vehicle to make contact with one of the pillars, it would have to speed over a ditch, then through two fences. And it's never been hit before. It's never happened. In over the 70 years our family has owned the property. Also, none of the large trees, fir trees or other, on our roadway or property has ever been involved in a vehicle accident. In the 1950s, Lane County Public Works started blacktopping Sears Road. This made it safer so we could ride our bikes and horses along the roadway. In the 60s, Interstate 5 was built, connecting Sears Road with I-5, and has been resurfaced several times. Each time the roadway was resurfaced, it was widened and encroached onto our property, near the large maple tree at the bend of the road. Lane County residents found that Sears Road was a fast shortcut to I-5, and they began speeding and cutting corners on the road to shorten their travel time. Our late father brought this problem to Lane County Public Works Department, and they agreed to help resolve it by putting up a traffic safety guardrail to protect the tree and the traffic. That tree is still in place today, and also the guardrail. We no longer let our children and grandchildren ride their bikes on the roadway due to the hazard of unlawful speeding vehicles. Only one fatal accident has occurred in front of our property. Cause of the accident was a juvenile driver speeding around the corner, crossing the northbound lane into the southbound lane, and hitting a pickup head-on. Had nothing to do with any trees or roadside obstacles. The only visual obstruction has been very tall blackberry vines growing up over the neighboring property. We contacted the owner and it has been resolved, and we have a clear view of the corner both ways. The Lane County Sheriff deputies need to do traffic control on Sears Road. Maybe this would help slow down the vehicles. Back to the widening of Sears Road, our family has known, and your own survey taken this year proves that our property line extends out 8 feet into Sears Road from the maple tree. So actually, we own half of Sears Road at that location. Lane County citizens and Lane County itself has allowed our property to be encroached upon without compensation, and which we have for the past 70 years paid Lane County property taxes. I stated that I attended the meeting, and I was told the Row River's cutting into the roadway. Well, I don't believe that to be true. There's a large island in the middle of the river, and the channel goes on the west side, not the east side, and we can't hardly get irrigation water out of the river. And never in my lifetime has the water flooded over Sears Road. So we said, well, what to do? Well, after listening to their comments, when the vote was taken to present their proposal, which again you haven't received yet, it passed by 1 vote. I am here representing residents of Sears Road who are not aware of the final proposal and could not attend any meetings due to work, school, or disability, and they were not able to drive at night when these meetings, public meetings, were held. Everyone who lives on Sears Road, and I have talked to many, believes the only hazard is the high rate of speed which vehicles travel. If Lane County would spend their money on projects that would slow traffic on the road, it would be safer for everyone. We need rumble strips, more long and longer double no passing stripes. Lane County should contact ODOT to change the designation of Sears Road from a minor collector to a scenic byway with a bike touring designation. This would also be allowing fixed speed zones in that area. And this was also the ideas of the no voters on passing that proposal. I spoke to one disabled resident who was very upset and afraid that if the trees, and they want to remove 61 out of 111 trees at this time, if it was removed from in front of her house, there's nothing to stop a vehicle. It leaves the roadway and it will hit her house. It will hit my bedroom, she cried. Division Chief Joe Roddy of the South Lane Fire Rescue could not be here today. He lives on Sears Road and wanted you to know that the fatality that occurred on milepost 1 on Sears Road was due to a medical problem. He did hit a fixed object, but he was dead before he left the roadway. So we're asking you to please, when you get the proposal, not to okay it, but to turn it back to the committee for more consideration. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes public comment unless there's somebody else that wants to address the board. See none, we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other remonstrance. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 things. Thank you, sir, for clarification on that matter. Appreciate that. To my next point, and I'll try and be brief, I appreciate Mrs. Roddy's position here. I have spoke with a number of people on Sears Road. They're clearly not happy with the prospect of taking out these trees. Some perhaps, but the tree that Ms. Roddy refers to, first of all, personal experience. I have been driving for over 50 years. I have driven over Sears Road throughout those 50 years. I'm familiar with the one tree that is a rather large tree. I'm also reminded of on Cloverdale Road 10, 12, 15 years ago, there was an issue of several large trees, I believe they were oaks, that were deemed to be a hazard, and there was quite a brouhaha about removing these trees. Those trees still stand. There has been no impact to those trees in that clearly more than a decade. I asked Miss Roddy on the phone last week because I knew her father, who lived in that home as far back as I can remember. Her brother lives down the road. She now lives in her father's home. I asked Miss Roddy how many times in her experience, which spans a few decades, how many times people have hit that tree. And she, to her recollection, that tree has never been impacted by a vehicle. The problem on Sears Road is clearly speed. We could use some better signage out there. I'm not sure if rumble strips are practical, but I do believe that cooperation with the State Highway Department or other authorities would look to put the double yellow lines in there. I have photos that I took in 1971, and those photos are of the 4 seasons that we enjoy in Lane County. I've got photos from the same spot on Sears Road with snow cover, fall leaves changing, full summer, just winter stuff. They're just 4 really outstanding photos that clearly show the seasons and the beauty of that area. To remove 61 trees, granted, there are probably some that should be removed, but as I've driven down that, I have noticed that there are a number of fence posts that are much closer to the highway than these trees. So I would strongly urge my fellows up here to, when this comes to us, to bear in mind if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of a look-see at this. There are corrections that can be made that are practical that I think that it is not right to remove all those trees as proposed, particularly those historic trees that have been there for many, many years. This is a speeding issue and distracted driver issue. It's not about trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, first of all, Mr. Ritter, thank you so much for following up on your email about the Lane County nuisance animal code. And I just want to make a suggestion that toward the end of our meeting today, we might put on our agenda request, maybe a report from our animal people on whether they've seen this and whether they could see it and whether they could meet with you and have a little more formal process to determining if they want to move forward on it, so we could figure out if it's a matter of a disagreement between you and them, or whether it's a matter of they do want to move in this direction, but they've never received direction to do so. The other thing is on the Sears Roads matter, the Roads Advisory Committee is advisory to the board, but their decisions are not, they don't make decisions, they make recommendations. And so either having this go back to Roads Advisory, which would be my preference, rather than to have them make a recommendation on such a narrow vote and without people that know that area, and knowing that Commissioner Williams has been monitoring this, it seems like rather than waiting until they make the recommendation and then have the board say, well, consider it further, might be better just to send the message that we would like them to take a look at it again now, and perhaps maybe hold a hearing in your area, maybe have a more of the time that people could make it, things like that maybe, so that some of these issues of the proximity of the fence posts or the slowing down of traffic, which, by the way, Roads Advisory does have a role in the speed of county roads, and so that's another issue of the signage or the rumble strips or other things to slow down traffic that might be helpful. So thanks so much for coming in.
Further remonstrance? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a couple of things really quickly. Both of you all mentioned additional work for the Sheriff's Department, which we all know is highly constrained at this point in time. However, placing priorities where priorities deserve to be and need to be is something I know the sheriff and staff pay attention to at all times. And while they're stretched thin, they absolutely do more than we can expect them to do. So thank you for the dogs, and I'm glad you didn't mention cats, because I have cats and they meow a lot. But Sears Road is a scenic drive. You're right, it is a scenic drive. There's no question about it. I've been down there several times. I don't travel it as often as you all do, but it is beautiful. That treed section right where it comes adjacent to Row River there, that's really lovely. Then, Mr. Chair, just a couple of other items very quickly. Mr. Rickoff, I'll direct this to you. On Sunday, I was asked to join a panel to talk about the largest challenges that we face in the coming year. The panel was Chief Joe Zaludek, the Springfield Eugene Fire Chief, Chief Skinner, the Eugene Police Chief, John Rees, the City Manager, Mayors Lundberg and Venus from Springfield and Eugene, and Gus Balderas, who's the Superintendent of 4J. And that was along with Pastor Ben Cross. And we had a chance to talk to, I'm guessing, someplace between 900 and 1,000 people. Every one of us, each one of us, without rehearsing ahead of time, cited homelessness and the ability to have stable living conditions for children, families, men, and women as the #1 concern that we have. There were other concerns wrapped into that, but homelessness and stable living conditions ranked as the highest without rehearsal. It was an amazing thing. The second thing I'll mention is that yesterday I had a chance to do something that I hadn't done for 44 years. I got to rake asphalt. And it had been a long time, and the crew chief said, you're kind of rusty, aren't you? And I was. I had a chance to go rake some asphalt out on Corey Road. out off of Territorial Highway with the Lane County crew. It's the last week of paving, and so I took the opportunity to, a beautiful day, and I rode on the paver for a while and actually did rake, and I got it back a little bit after a while. I'm glad somebody came behind me and finished the job. But I got to tell you, the men, this was an all-male crew, but the men and women who work on our roads, not only do they keep them in top-notch shape during the summer when they get to chip seal and pave, but you know, they're the ones who get out there first before the utility crews when the ice storms hit. So the work that they do on our roads, I know I see a couple of deputies and the sheriff sitting here. I know it makes your job easier. So I just at this point, Mr. Rick, I'd like to thank the men and women who do our roads for us. So thank you very much. It's a lot of fun. If you've not done it, try it. It's, the smell of hot asphalt in the morning, oh my gosh.
Thank you. Yeah. How do you follow that? First, I'll take a moment to thank Mr. Ritter for bringing up the nuisance. It sounds like a logical way of improving some code to make it more easier to apply, because it is difficult when we have language in code that is subjective versus objective. So I appreciate that. And as the owner of 4 dogs, I hope that, you know, I would never get past a couple minutes of incessant barking. So, and as far as Sears Road goes, you know, we'll take a look at that. You know, I ride Sears Road on I'm a cyclist. It's one of the ways you can get down to Cottage Grove, you know, without using Highway 99, which is just about a death trap for cyclists. So it is a great alternative route to Highway 99 and heavily used by cyclists. So the idea of a redesignation, you know, might work. I don't know. I'd have to talk with some of our public works traffic folks. I will say that we really don't have a lot of control over speed limits. That is actually an ODOT function, approving speed limits and classification of roadways. I know I've fought for some decreases in speed limits in various areas where it was a safety concern, and you have to push like crazy to try and get a speed limit lowered and that's on a county roadway. Even though we own it, ODOT controls what the posted speed limit is. There's a reason for that in some ways. It's about expectation of traffic flow, and you don't want to set a speed limit so far below what the average speeds are that it causes issues with traffic obeying the speed limit being way slower than what people want to drive. It can actually cause accidents, having that differential in speed. But it is a consistent issue that we're always kind of bumping heads with ODOT about, is, you know, when we can get a lowering, whether it was First Avenue coming into Junction City, where there were some driveway entrances to 55 and up neighborhoods, or trying to get the school zones extended in Veneta along Territorial Highway. It's always a battle to get a speed zone change. So, but we'll take a look at that. And, you know, coming from an engineering background, I understand the desire to remove fixed objects. It's one of those things that you just, the whole point is you want people to be able to recover from a mistake, you know, if they do go off a roadway, if they do speed and lose control. But you have to kind of weigh that with a balance of you know, how much do we want to foam pad the world for people. I will say I wish we had more patrol resources, and that's something the board has a long-term plan to hopefully address. You know, if we can get more patrol resource, that would make a big difference. The sheriff does a great job of what he has to do. In fact, he just finished up some additional overtime patrols to try and control distracted driving, DUI, and speeding, with some pretty good success. They had, you know, some good numbers reported on that, but we're having to use grant funding and overtime to do that kind of work. That's how limited resource we are. So we'll continue working on our 10-year public safety plan and trying to work towards more patrol resources, because that's the one place I think we're lacking right now in that engineering, enforcement, and education as far as traffic safety goes. I think part of the proposal to remove the trees is because we have engineering money right now from the new House Bill 2017. We don't have enforcement money, unfortunately. So we'll keep working on that. We'll take a look at the proposal when it does come from Roads Advisory Committee. Like Commissioner Sorensen mentioned, it is just an advisory proposal to the board, and we have the ability to send it back. So really appreciate your testimony. Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I hope Ms. Roddy doesn't mind that I mentioned the fact that you were a police dispatcher for a number of years in Cottage Grove, and that I believe that your brother is captain on the Cottage Grove rural fire department. So thank you for your service in all those years. I remember going in over the years, and you were behind the glass window dispatching, and you did that for a great number of years, and I appreciate that as well. So thank you for coming today.
Any further remonstrance? Seeing none, then we'll move on to emergency business. Is there any emergency business today?
No, sir.
Then that gets us to the consent calendar, which are items that are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in a single motion. If there was interest in discussing them, they would have been pulled under adjustments to the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar for September 25th, 2018.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say this, if I may. Thank you to the board leadership. The consent calendar, we pass it in single motion without discussion, but a great deal of work goes into preparing that and putting it on the agenda. And there is, just because it's consent doesn't mean that it's significant and important business that we take care of. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. A lot of times it goes unnoticed how much work is in that consent calendar, including today we approved an endorsement of the Vietnam War Memorial up on the state capitol grounds.
That is what I was thinking about.
And Mr. Chair, I also, for the public's benefit, and maybe mine as well, what is the timeline for staff to submit items for the consent calendar? Is that a week ahead of the Thursday release of the agenda?
Yes, so it's basically, I'm sorry, Chair Bosevich, Commissioner Sorensen, it is 2 weeks ahead.
Of the meeting or of the Thursday release of the budget?
Of the meeting itself, so a week ahead of the Thursday release.
Okay, so for today's consent calendar that was approved today, the deadline for departments was 1 week ago?
Well, it's actually 2 weeks ago in order for the materials to be approved, reviewed, and turned around. And honestly, each department has its own timeline. So for some of those materials, it's 3 weeks in advance of the actual discussion.
Yeah, but the point for the public is that by Thursday afternoon, ahead of a Tuesday board meeting, the public is informed, the board's informed. I mean, part of my Thursday routine is to look at that agenda as soon as it's out to see what's on the consent calendar. And the public has that same right.
Commissioner Sorensen, yes, all of the material is available the Thursday before.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that gets us down to county council announcements.
Chair Bosevich, members of the board, I have just a couple. One is I'm very pleased to announce that I have filled the one support vacancy in my office with Kinsey Silburn. Mr. Farr knows who she is. She is a very competent Oregon State University graduate. You knew I'd work that in somewhere. And so she's been extra help. Now she's a full-time employee, and we're excited to have her. And it's good because she has some familiarity with our processes and can hit the ground running. The second thing I wanted to mention is I did speak briefly with Ms. Roddy, the person in public that made the comments in public comment. We have an FSIT meeting, the Fatal Crash Investigation Team meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to bring her comments to that group. And you may recall when I did my quarterly, when we did our quarterly update, this is the classic balance, and we used this, actually, this very project, you'll recall, was one of those ones that we had laid out where people could pick their option of what they'd want to do, put in a guardrail, take out a tree, whatever, leave it. So this just shows the tension that's in that process, but I will bring her comments up. And the final thing is, I did want to remind the board that we do have an executive session later this morning with 2 items. That's all I have, unless you have a specific question of me.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Dingle. Thank you. That gets us down to county administration, and our first item is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1809 in the matter of amending Chapter 8 of Lane Code to extend the term and franchise agreement with Comcast of Oregon 2 for operation of a cable communications system to January 1, 2019, amending ordinance 1207. And this second reading and public hearing would be scheduled for October 9th, 2018. And is that, Christine, is that your item?
It is, yes. So I am helping with the negotiations for the county with the 2 cities, Springfield and Eugene. We have been in negotiations for quite some time. They actually started before I joined, probably 9 months ago would be my guess. So they've been going for well over a year, but we are getting close. We have just a few items. I'm actually heading over there at 10 to have another meeting today. So the 2 cities have extended their franchise agreements out till January 1st with the hope that we'll be done here and start that process to finalize the agreement. So this is approving for the county to move that out to January 1st also.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things really quickly. One thing that folks don't realize is that we do have a cable commission, and that Commissioner Lockett and I sit on the cable commission, grueling, intense hours, well, sometimes minutes of work. Normally, it's pretty straightforward work that we do, and it's usually as an adjunct to the MPC, Metropolitan Policy Commission. But one thing I always say when we talk about cable is something that people don't realize. We think of cable as being I think teleprompter. What's their new name?
In the ground.
Say again?
In the ground, or?
The TV cable company.
Oh, Comcast?
Comcast.
Yeah.
I think it's teleprompter and AT&T, the names they've had through the years. But people think that since they are a cable company and they're the one that provides the main cable, particularly for the city of Eugene and Springfield, that they don't have competition. I always point out they do have extreme competition on every avenue of their work, from quite often from companies that do not have the same kind of franchising and right of right of way use that the cable company pays. Everybody does pay a right of way in some fashion, but the ones with in the ground, on the ground, hard wiring do pay a different sort of right of way fee. So there is competition, even though you may not think there's competition. And years ago, I corrected a city councilor when he said the teleprompter has no competition. I said, well, yeah, they do. And that was the advent of direct TV, or what the precursor of direct TV was. So always have to point that out. And I'm always corrected a little bit by saying, oh, no, direct TV pays franchise fees. Well, they do. But it's a different level than the hard-wired cable company does. So thank you.
So if there's no further discussion?
I was just going to add that there is a Federal Cable Act, actually, that also sets all of the stuff that Comcast follows. So we do have to look to that even in these negotiations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Summers.
So let me ask some really basic, not basic cable, but basic questions here. So people that get television through direct means from a satellite, are those companies paying any fees to Lane County? Probably not.
This is where I'm going to show my, that I haven't been involved in this super long, but no, I'm not aware of any. They don't pay franchise fees in the same way that Comcast did, as Commissioner Farr just.
They're like radio stations. If they own property in the county, they pay property taxes. But if they don't own property in the county, like some radio program, you know, I was on Lars Larson, and he does not pay property taxes in Lane County, but he broadcasts to Lane County.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. And it's going to be different in the county versus within city limits.
Okay.
So we've had quite a bit of conversation on the competitive equity piece. That's a piece we're still working on right now in the agreement.
But
is
these
that
are within companies that use the
wireless.
roadway, like that they have a wire down, buried in a roadway, a city, county, or state roadway, and they pay a fee for that.
Depending on where they are, correct?
Okay.
Not everybody with a wire down a county right-of-way will pay the same as if they're in a city. So there are differences. Like the city of Eugene charges for internet services, they have a 7% tax, whereas the cable franchise is a 5% tax on cable. So it depends on what service they're providing. Their rate may change, but the county doesn't have that same thing. And even the city of Springfield has not enacted an internet tax at this point. So there's different taxes depending on.
And it's fair to say this whole thing is heavily regulated.
Yes, very.
Okay.
Mr. Farr.
Just one brief historical note. Back in the, I believe it was in 1995 or maybe early 1996, the city of Eugene had started long years of work for the Council Commission on Telecommunications, which did cable as well as the expanding at the time cellular telephone. And that was a committee it was Nancy Nathanson, Sean Bowles, and me. We met for a lot of years. And the city of Eugene kind of led the way nationally on some of the work that's been done as far as reaching agreements with the telecommunications companies. So it's, this is kind of the hotbed. And Pam Berrien was she was staff of that committee back in those early days.
So if there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for October 9th. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of the first reading of ordinance 1809 and setting the second reading reading and public hearing for October 9th, 2018. And this is the matter of amending Chapter 8 of Lane Code to extend the term and franchise agreement with Comcast of Oregon 2 for operation of cable communication systems to January 1st, 2019. And this is amending ordinance 1207.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 1809. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That brings us down to item 8B, which is Order 1809-1105 in the matter of awarding Title III projects under PL 115-141. And again, we have Christine Moody. And I see we also have some folks in the Sheriff's Office behind.
Yeah, they're here if you have any questions. So I'll just go through the memo first and let you know what we've received. So this is the Title III funding that we most recently were awarded. There was a 2-year extension. We'll receive the second year of funding in fiscal year 18-19 that we're in right now. So a big piece that I want to point out to you is that there were some changes to the allowable uses, and they both are things that will benefit the county. On the memo that you have, the second page, I actually highlighted the language in red so that you can see that they added reimbursing counties for law enforcement patrols. That is something that was not there before. And in fact, we had, legal counsel had interpreted that we shouldn't be using it based on how we were funding our patrols in the past. And then they added a whole new section to cover training costs and equipment purchase directly related to the emergency services described in paragraph 2 above, which is search and rescue, other emergency services, and those law enforcement patrols. And then they did add a little bit of language about carrying out community wildfire protection plans instead of just developing them. So there is a requirement to put out a 45-day public comment and request for new projects in the law, and so we did that. We published that, closed on September 13th. Before I even published that notice, I did reach out internally to our departments because that is where most of our projects come from, is the Sheriff's Office and Land Management Division that does the FireWise projects, and had received the law enforcement and the search and rescue. So those 2 projects were published as part of that 45-day notice. During the 45 days, FireWise did go ahead and put in another project for $200,000 to extend their program as long as possible. So the one thing I want to add on the Fireways project is they still have obligated money from the last funding that we received. Because the board has obligated it for Fireways projects, there isn't a timeline for them to have to spend it. It's already been obligated for that project, so they've been spending it over the last couple years. Due to the strong economy, their staff has been busy with land use issues of building and other things, and they haven't had as much time to dedicate to the Firewise program. So this last year, it wasn't really big as far as grants out to the community, but they've added an FTE, and they expect that that will ramp back up. And I did provide to you, well, first, let me tell you the amount. So the amount of funding that we expect to be available is about 1.98. That's the total funding over the 2 years. There are some overhead expenses for this fund, just as any other county fund, so trying to take those into account. We put the notice out saying that it would be about 1.6 million that would be expended on projects. The requests for the 3 projects that have come in are right under 1.6. It's 1.9 or 1.597600. The search and rescue put in a project, law enforcement of federal lands, and then the Fireways program that I mentioned. So I did provide you also in the packet their entire applications that ask the questions that kind of get to the allowable uses, provide some financial details on what's being provided over the time frame, if there's FTE involved. For the Firewise program, they expect it will provide funding through 2023, the combination of that old money they have with this new money. And then the sheriff's office, I'm trying to see that date. They say also through 2023, September 30th of 2023. So all 3 projects will be going through that time frame. So as I mentioned, the sheriff's office is here. They are available to answer any questions you have on their specific projects. Otherwise, I'm open for any other questions.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And I don't have questions for the Sheriff's Department. Others may, but I just wanted to mention Firewise, which is something we don't talk about very frequently, but in the advent of what we saw in California in particular this year, Firewise is a really significant program where local property owners outside the city limits, I believe, or at least outside of Eugene and Springfield city limits, can qualify for grants up to, what, $10,000 or $15,000 to prepare defensible space around their property.
Correct, yes, yes.
And I don't know how many people take advantage of that, but it's nice to know that the program is ongoing. That's a commonly asked question is, when is this going to end? And
right, it's continued to be ongoing as we've received the additional funding. So it is quite a popular program, and I don't have numbers for you on how many have taken advantage of it, but millions of dollars have gone out to support property owners in grant form where they hire a landscape architect or something to help them with that defensible space around their homes. And it can even be things like roof shingles and things like that that will help in the event of a wildfire.
And I would guess water access too. A lot of people found out the hard way that the first defense always is defending your own property, because once a fire begins, once it starts moving, well, I'm not an expert on that, but I read a lot this year about what happened with the rural residential properties. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't have a question, but I think this is a perfect time to share some information. And so myself and a few people have been working closely with Senator Wyden's office on where he now is working directly with Senator Crapo of Idaho. And it's not a bill, but it's a concept that has now moved into an actual title. And what this idea is to completely replace securable schools with an endowment that would be consistent. So an endowment that would be consistent constantly, so we don't have to constantly go back to Congress and fight for securable schools. At this point in time, I'm going to tell you that all it is a concept, but you do have 2 senators now working on it. The challenge right now, it's going to be delayed for a while because Senator Crapo is currently on the Judiciary Committee, and I've heard there's a circus going on in D.C. right now, and so they used to call it a confirmation process, but I think it's called a circus now. But anyway, it's the working title is Fund for Rural Economic Stability and Health Act of 2018. I think it'll go well in past 2018 and go into 2019. But just a few highlights is that it's along with an initial one-time congressional appropriation to seed the new endowment fund, annual commercial receipts generated on Forest Service, National Wildlife Refuge, and O&C lands managed by Bureau of Land Management will be deposited annually into a fund. And the idea is to, I think, begin with $6 billion into this fund, and then it would then, based on formula, would come back to the counties. And so, as we know, we're an O&C county, but Lane County is actually the largest U.S. Forest Service county, not just in Oregon, but I think in the country. And so it's something that's being developed. It's kind of interesting. If at this point in time, I'm just going to let you know it's a concept. And I don't see it moving anywhere, at least not in this current Congress. Who knows in 2019, but I've had the opportunity to work on this and with Senator Wyden's office, and we'll see where it goes. But I think just based on what you're putting forth to us today, I thought it was a good opportunity to share. It's now in public because he's now met with NACO, and I believe they're meeting with AOC this next month, and to present as well. So there it is. I'll keep you in the loop, keep you informed, and where it goes. But thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Farr, about Firewise. I think that's something that sometimes get lost, but yet it's very, very important fund out there. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll just note how important this source of funding's been to our search and rescue and some of our forest deputy enforcement, and just the impact that has not just to rural residents, but that's really big for even the city dwellers, as 50% of the people that we go out and search and rescue for live inside city limits. Only 20% of rural residents are that, and the other 30% tend to be out of county folks visiting. So that's an important service for our municipal residents of this county, that search and rescue. As there being the majority of our citizens are municipal residents, that's why they would tend to be the majority of our search and rescue folks or parties that we're looking for. But it's really important, and it's been what's kind of kept our search and rescue afloat, is these Title III funds over the last 15 years or so. It's really an important piece of how we've managed to keep that part of our sheriff's department functional. So really important set of funding. Good to hear we might get some permanent and not such fluctuation with this fund. That's kind of why we have leftover money in land management for Firewise, because we'll get a lump sum amount thrown in there. They don't get it quite spent down and all that. But that's also just a great function, whether it's making driveways wide enough to get a fire truck down and providing that access to get back into properties, or if it's just a defensible space and building materials. It's a great program. With that, I'll look for a motion. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of Order 1809-1105 in the matter of awarding Title III projects under PL 115-141.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of Order 1809-1105 in the matter of awarding Title III projects, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So we are about 5 minutes early for our 10 o'clock time certain. And I don't know if we've got a 5-minute fill item, other than I think I'll spend a moment at least to advise the board that Judy Williams is looking for input on what items to cover next week under the strategic plan update. And I think she'd asked the board members to supply their top 3 or top 4, I can't remember, items. And just if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to give that feedback to her so she can talk about what we want to hear. And then I would also like to remind board members that on October 10th, we are going to be having a work session with the city of Eugene at noon time. That's a Wednesday. It's not a normal time. And then there will be a meeting in the evening at 5:30 on the topic, which is going to be on the report from TAC on our homelessness system that will, they'll be presenting to the public, and there'll be an opportunity for the public to give input. There will not be public comment at the Wednesday noon meeting. So I would highly recommend keeping your calendar open that Wednesday evening so you can kind of hear some of the public comments. So just a heads up that Wednesday, October 10th, you're going to want to plan around those two meetings if you can.
And that is a focus on a permanent, year-round, 24-hour shelter on the potential locations.
And also just overall our system of providing services to the homeless. Because one of the things their work products is a complete mapping of that system. So like we did with the mental health system not too long back. So.
Chair Bosevich, I'm happy to give announcements now. We have a minute or two before our time's certain.
Sure, that'd be great.
That's okay. Commissioners, just very quickly, a reminder that the County Administrator, Mokrahysky, is at the ICMA conference this week. He'll be returning to the office on Friday. Up until that time, I will be working, acting in capacity. Quick update. Many of you noticed that a number of staff folks had the morning out of the office on September 20th. We had various units participating in the United Way Day of Caring, tech services, financial services, and the county administration all participated. County administration had the chance to work with the Grassroots Garden out on Coburg Road. It was a great and productive morning, one of those days when one is handling a pitchfork and a shovel or a weeder. You can actually see the benefits of one's work almost instantaneously. We can't often say that in administration. But it's a tremendous opportunity to actually team build. We were paired with Mackenzie Willamette, had a chance to work directly with their new chief executive officer, and truly had a great day. Chair Bosevich, thank you for the reminder on the strategic plan. Yes, Judy Williams is looking for those strategies that you would like us to highlight. I was informed, you all know this, perhaps the listeners at home do not. One of the remarkable individuals we have working for the county is Diana Jones. She keeps us on the straight and narrow, and she was able to remind me that we actually post the agendas 2 weeks in advance. So the public have the chance 2 weeks prior to read the packets, understand the materials, and know what we're working on. And then finally, thank you very much. We have, with the Title $3, the Secure Rural Schools endowment concept, I hope is one that we'll be taking to the Legislative Committee and have that come back as a piece of the work. I think with that, we might be very close to time.
Yeah, I think we're close enough, and I see that the folks that are here that are going to give the presentation are here. So let's move on to our Item 8C, which is an update from the Public Safety Coordinating Council. This is a quarterly update, and we have Paul Solomon and guests. So I'll invite Paul to come up, and if you want to introduce anyone else that's with you.
Who's the guy with the star?
Yeah.
And we will need some assistance in getting the computer set up. So if I can have some staff assistance, I'd appreciate that very much. Are these single copies?
Yes. I'm sorry, I gave you too much. That's it. Give it these.
Looks like he's got it pretty well lit. So I don't think we need.
Bingo. All right. Morning, Chair Bozovich, members of the board. We are pleased to be in front of you to present on our quarterly update from the Public Safety Coordinating Council. We've got a full agenda, so I think we're going to jump right in. The first item that we want to discuss with you is an overview of the Lane County Pay for Success project. Various members of the board have heard about this project. It's been underway for about 1.5 years. It's a partnership between sponsors, Homes for Good, and Lane County Parole and Probation. So we are nearing the point that we are actually going to launch in the next couple of weeks, and I thought it would be appropriate to give you all an update on the project. So without further ado, this is a project between sponsors, Lane County's leading reentry services program, Homes for Good, which you as the board, I'm sure are well acquainted with the services that they provide, and Lane County Parole and Probation. And what we have done is taken the 54 units that were constructed in 2017 at the Oaks at 14th and coupled them with an additional 46 units that Homes for Good has committed in scattered site public housing to get to a 100-unit minimum that was required by HUD and the Department of Justice. So the goal here is to provide permanent supportive housing in these 100 units and really turbocharge or put on steroids the type of services that we're providing. Enhanced case management, mental health services, parole officers with lower caseloads, cognitive behavioral therapy groups, and a range of services that are designed to increase housing stability, reduce recidivism, and a more appropriate utilization of healthcare dollars. It's a $7 million project in total and will include a rigorous evaluation. And I'll talk a little bit more about how these projects function. Historically, they've been called social impact bonds, pay for success, outcomes-oriented contracting. And the piece that we're focusing on is really this outcomes-oriented contracting or performance-based contracting. The idea of which is that you're paying for specific outcomes instead of a scope of work. And in this case, the outcomes that we're talking about are reductions in recidivism, homelessness, and a more appropriate utilization of healthcare dollars. So, as I said, one of the main goals is to achieve better outcomes for a specific population. Here we're talking about those folks in DOC custody who have housing instability, and establishing an outcomes-oriented contract where government pays for the successful delivery of outcomes. So in this case, we're creating a new state-level funding stream to pay for reentry services tied to justice, housing, and healthcare outcomes. We'll be exploring alternate forms of contracting for scarce resources to address expanding social need. We'll create a platform for ongoing collaboration between the Department of Corrections, the Criminal Justice Commission, Oregon Housing Community Services, and the Oregon Health Authority. The other piece of this is there's a rigorous evaluation that is being embedded. So we'll have a 5-year evaluation to really assess the effectiveness of this intervention. So sponsors, Homes for Good and Lane County Parole and Probation partnered to apply for a grant in 2017 that was issued by HUD and the Department of Justice. We were one of 7 awardees. We received $1.3 million, and this was largely a planning grant. But what this allowed us to do was all of the data analysis, pay for some of the evaluation, but it also left, you see over here in the right-hand corner, between $270,000 and $585,000 that we can use for success payments. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is as we move forward. The outcomes that we are assessing are recidivism, which is measured by days incarcerated due to a felony conviction, reductions in homelessness, which is measured by days of stable housing as validated by a lease, and an increase in the appropriate use of healthcare services, which is measured by the number of emergency room visits, inpatient stays, and then conversely, we look at things like primary care utilization, behavioral health care utilization, and prescription utilization. Those are things we want to see rise while we see things like emergency room visits and inpatient stays decrease. Eugene is the third largest, well, second, third, depending on the day of the week, largest city in the state of Oregon, I think is well positioned to take on a project of this scope. And this is something that we hope will be replicated throughout the country. So the way these projects work traditionally is that you have a funder that provides the initial capital to pay for the services. And oftentimes this is an investor. Philanthropic investors, but by and large, they are still asking for some type of return on their investment. They pay for the services. You line up a contract with government to pay on the back end once those outcomes that we've discussed have been achieved. And then they wind up paying the investor back with interest. The way we've structured this is we've removed the investor from the equation, made the process much simpler. We went to the state and said, we want to structure this as an outcomes-oriented contract. So you'll be paying in 6-month increments for very specific outcomes. So it's still structured kind of like a pay-for-success project, but we got rid of the investors. We're not paying interest. It makes the project much simpler. In addition, there's always an evaluation to ensure that the project can validate the outcomes that we're providing. And we are the service providers, and what we're trying to do is provide 125 people with permanent supportive housing. These are folks that are released from prison, moderate to very high risk to reoffend, and provide them with wraparound services to achieve the outcomes. As I said, we were one of 7 awardees nationally. There's a lot of attention being paid to these grants. As you can see, next to Rhode Island, we are by far the smallest jurisdiction, LA County, Prince George, Montgomery. So the fact that we were competitive speaks highly of the partnerships that we've developed here in Lane County. And additionally, we are getting regular site visits from HUD, DOJ, and the Urban Institute, which is overseeing the valuations on all these projects. So where we are in this right now is we're just about ready to launch. We've done all of the data analysis. We've worked on developing the actual evaluation, assessing the project economics, identifying the population that we want to serve. Now we're at the place where we're ready to launch, but we're in the middle of the biennium, so our timing's a little off. So what we did is, as you recall in that second slide, there was that $275,000 to $580,000 that was left in the grant that we could use for success payments. We can't use it to provide direct services, but we can pay someone back. It has to be an investor or state or local government. And so we went to the Oregon Community Foundation and got a $500,000 low-interest loan that will be paid back by the grant dollars. So we are ready to launch October 1st, and that'll provide us with enough capital to get us to the beginning of the 1921 biennium. We currently have a $3 million POP budget request in the Criminal Justice Commission's budget. We have the support of the governor's office, so we are hopeful that that money will be there to provide funding at least through the third year of the project. And then once we are able to show results, I think it'll be much easier to get the final 2 years of funding from the state. As part of our data analysis, we were required to do something that's called an Rct Power Analysis. It's kind of a precursor to a randomized control trial. And what we did is we looked at everybody that was released from prison between 2012 and 2014. During that period of time, the baseline for recidivism in Lane County was 33%. And we're using the definition of returning to prison with a new felony conviction. Using that same definition, we compared the treatment group, which was individuals who went through sponsors' long-term housing prior to the construction of the Oaks, with all of these intensive services. And what we found was the recidivism rate was 13%, a 60% reduction in recidivism. And while this doesn't tell us how we're going to perform in this project, it's a good precursor, it's a good proxy to indicate that we have the ability to move the dial significantly on recidivism reduction. We also looked at healthcare dollars and how they're being spent. And what we found was we did a similar kind of look where we took a look at everybody released to Lane County. And I should also mention that when we were doing these comparisons, in the population of everybody released to Lane County, it's low risk to very high risk. The population that we're serving at sponsors were moderate to very high risk. So it's actually a more challenging population to compare to. And what we found was, with this analysis, a 29% reduction in emergency department stays, 5% reduction in inpatient stays, and increases in prescription, primary care, and behavioral health care dollars, which the system wants to see. We want to see higher utilizations there and lower utilizations in emergency and inpatient stay. So this, again, is just a proxy moving forward. We've had conversations with Trillium, our CCO, about potentially being an end payer in the project, and are hopeful that they will be a part of this as well. Here's the full budget for the project. So what you see in 2017 is the capital outlay. And this was for the construction of the Oaks. And a lot of this was in the form of low-income housing tax credits. We also had some justice reinvestment money that Lane County contributed, as well as federal subsidies that Jacob, Fox, and Homes for Good were able to provide. So moving forward, the budget, what we see down here in the green is money that's already committed. So the light green is the Section 8 subsidies that have been committed to the project. The dark green is money that's already committed through grant and aid and House Bill 3194 Justice Reinvestment Grant Program dollars. But that only gets us through the end of this biennium, and we had this gap to launch. And so that's where the OCF loan came in. With those dollars, which we just finalized, we are prepared to launch probably October 1st. And the challenge we have before us is the additional funding for the remaining 4 years. And as I said, we have a $3 million request in, pop budget request in the CJC's budget this year, or for this upcoming biennium. So that's the project in a nutshell. It's complicated, but I wanted to give you guys a brief overview and allow for any questions before we move on to the next item.
Commissioner Sorensen.
What is Third Capital Partners?
They are the consultant that helped us structure this project. So the grant dollars actually paid for them to come and do a lot of the data analysis, the transaction structuring, and help us set up the contracts.
And one of your metrics is emergency room visits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that related to your population of people that have gotten out of prison, or is that? I mean, it seems like that's good, but on the other hand, it doesn't seem to be specific to former prisoners.
No, it could be any population, but we wanted to look at this population specifically, those folks releasing from prison, returning to Lane County. So we looked at a cohort of over 1,000 individuals, including sponsors folks, and we teased out the sponsors folks from the remaining 825 individuals who were released during that time period, just to get us a bead on their healthcare utilization, in hopes that we could encourage Trillium to be an end payer, because what we're seeing with the people who receive these services is a more appropriate utilization of healthcare dollars.
What about Sacred Heart? Aren't they the major beneficiaries of the community's efforts to get people out of the ER?
I would say yes, but those services are being paid for with Medicaid dollars. So I think the difference in years past, Peace Health provided a lot of subsidies for indigent people. 95% of the people releasing from prison are Medicaid eligible. So it's really about using those Medicaid dollars more wisely. And yes, they are a beneficiary in a sense, but it's more about how we use Medicaid dollars.
What is the reason that Sacred Heart is not a partner?
It's a good question. I think that they have, well, we've spoken with Peace Health preliminarily. They are aware of the project, but it's hard for us to show how this would impact them specifically because they're getting paid regardless. They're getting paid by Medicaid when these people walk in the door. So I don't know that they have as much of a vested interest in reductions as Trillium does.
Their complaint to policymakers is that, yes, they are paid by Medicaid, but they are not paid anywhere near what they're expending. And so it does cost them money in some sense to serve Medicaid patients. And they're constantly asking the congressional delegation, local officials, state officials, what can you do to help us regarding this inadequate Medicaid payment? And my question is, well, we're one of your big problems here. We're supplying a lot of these people to your ER. And if we can get them diverted, including our post-prison population diverted, it really is saving you money. So it's not an answer to say, oh, well, gee, why don't we just send them all to Sacred Heart? They get paid anyway. Well, they don't get paid enough. See what I'm saying?
I do, and I'd be happy to follow up with them.
Well, I just think that if you need support from the Board of Commissioners or the city government or the state government to be a partner in this and say, look, we're really doing something good here to try to help the community. Because, you know what, it's our relatives that have insurance that are paying for this, okay? Yeah. It's middle-class people that are paying for this difference. So we have a big interest in this. It's not just our humanitarian concern for this post-prison population. Yes, that is a concern, and everybody up here shares that. But we also have an equal concern for the people, the employers that have to pay the insurance and the workers that have to increasingly pay a higher percentage of their insurance. We have an incentive, those people have an incentive to cut that population and have the proper utilization of the healthcare system. Anyway.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. There's a lot to say about this amazing program. And Mr. Rickoff, you and I sat in on a presentation, I think it was probably close to 2 years ago, and had excitement for it at that point in time. One of the reasons that I am excited, and Commissioner Sorensen touched on this a little bit, is how closely it wraps into our Poverty and Homelessness Board's goal of establishing 600 supportive housing units between now and 2021. And you're talking about 100 units here. That's a chunk of our goal. And where Peace Health wraps into this, and also where Kaiser wraps into it, and Pacific Source wraps into it, and Trillium wraps into it, is our focus on the frequent user system engagement, which has the same metrics, almost identical to the metrics you're discussing, and Peace Health is a strong contributor to that. What the frequent user system engagement does is it identifies the same, using the same metrics of people who are using our emergency services in the greatest frequency. And we've seen numbers from the pilot program on that, which have, even though 13%, reduction to 13% is an amazing number that we've achieved through sponsors and through the Oaks, and through other sponsors' programs. The numbers that we're seeing on the frequent user system engagement are even greater than that, where we're seeing 82% reduction in use of emergency services in some cases on a tiny pilot program. And Mr. Solomon, what you're presenting here is an exciting moment in time because it couples with a recent SAMHSA grant that we just received of 5 million, let's see, what is it?
2 million.
A total of $400,000 times 5. over the next 5 years, which will wrap into this program also. So we're moving together, not just on a single front, as on a very broad front in addressing the deep needs. And recidivism, of course, is one of our major functions, major focuses, particularly in this program. But it's more than just the folks suffering from the propensity for recidivism, but people who do access our emergency services. Bravo, triple bravo on this. And thank you for the work with Peace Health and other providers in making sure that it happens across a broad range of needs in our community. So it really, once again, I could talk for a long time about how exciting this is because of the teamwork involved and how it fits into a much larger program to just move us forward unilaterally. So you're faunching to say something. So, and Sheriff Trapp, you're deeply involved with this. You and I have talked about this, particularly the frequent user system engagement. You work on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. So you see the effects of this and the dramatic results from a tiny pilot program and how it's going to be expanded through this program. So, Mr. Solomon, I'm sorry I keep talking here.
Chair Bozievich, Commissioner Farr, thank you both. In the interest of time, because we still have a number of things we'd like to cover, if it's okay, I'd like us to move on.
I was going to say, speaking of recidivism.
So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Susan Sowards, who staffs the Public Safety Coordinating Council, to share some recidivism data, followed by Sheriff Trapp, who will share some information about how our CCA dollars are being used in the jail.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning. Being a short person here, I lowered my chair. Now I have to lower the mic. We pulled together some data the other day and presented to the Public Safety Coordinating Council out of our most recent report to the Criminal Justice Commission on justice reinvestment dollars. And in doing that, I presented that, took feedback from them. So this is slightly different than what I presented to them the other day, but it still gets at much of the same thing. Oregon has, one of our promising successes that we've seen, program successes and promising practices, has been the use of short-term transitional leave, which was passed by the legislature. It's a practice of returning people from prison certain periods of time, and that period of time varies depending on which program they're in, but it brings them home, in this case puts them in the Community Corrections Center in Lane County, and then they step down into sponsors and begin right away to work with sponsors. Most of them end up in the housing at sponsors. So we wanted to look at some of the short-term transitional leave, and this isn't specific to that program, it's just all short-term transitional leave in Lane County. The Criminal Justice Commission has a pretty amazing dashboard that delivers all kinds of data on their programs and on programs that they fund and on the indicators that for that program. So the data that you're going to see here comes from those dashboards. Basically, we looked at releases to short-term transitional leave from January 2014 through June 2018. So over that, basically 3.5 year period. And what we see is I compared Lane County to the other 4 metro counties and also to the state. So you could get some framework within which to view this data. The first one, the first table that you have in front of you there is through June 2018, because that's what we had available for the report that we submitted, and we submitted this data as part of the report. So the key part here to me is there's a lot of drilling down you could do, but successful completions, 94.8% in Lane County who returned to Lane County early completed the program successfully, 5.2% unsuccessfully, and only 1.2% were unsuccessful with a new crime. So that gets back to these different ways of measuring recidivism. And as you look down, you'll see that we were quite a bit better than Clackamas, Marion, Multnomah, Washington, or the state as far as the percent that were unsuccessful with a new crime. So you want that number to be low, because basically they were unsuccessful, but on top of that, they were unsuccessful because they committed a new crime. That factored into that. Then I looked at it again, thinking, well, I always like to look at data over time, so I at least leapt forward to let's see what we saw in August, because that was the next one posted on Criminal Justice Commission. We're at 1.1%, and we're still quite a bit above anybody else as far as keeping that recidivism low. None of those other counties have anything like sponsors where people step down into housing that is there for them, the short-term transitional leave, and now there's that, for some of those people, there'll be a possibility of long-term supported housing, so permanent supported housing. So I just wanted to throw that out for you for data. There are 4 goals of justice reinvestment, so that's the other thing for this report that we're required to look at is how are we moving forward on those goals. I, as you know, have been doing this work a long time with the Public Safety Coordinating Council for the majority of the time since 1996, and have been looking at that recidivism data a long time. For a long time, the only data that we had to look at was the incarceration recidivism data that Department of Corrections dealt with. But part of the legislation that created the Justice Reinvestment Initiative also said, let's look at 3 different measures of recidivism. So now the Criminal Justice Commission collects data on arrest recidivism, conviction recidivism, and incarceration recidivism. They take this cohort of people that every 6 months, they take a cohort of people, and from the point in time when they're released back into the community, and here we're looking at parole and post-prison supervision, people returning to the community, they do a 3-year data collection on them. So what you're looking at here is, if it says it's a 1999 cohort, the data is 3 months later, or 3 years later. And likewise, we looked at the most recent data, which was 2014, so that's 2017 data. So it's a little confusing, but it's comparable is the good thing on that. So in 1999, you can see the arrest recidivism rate, the conviction recidivism rate, and the incarceration recidivism rate. Lane counties was higher than all the metro counties combined or the state percent. When you come into today's data, to the 2017 data, which is the most current, you see that we've dropped in arrest conviction data, arrest data from 54% to 39, conviction data from 51 to 31, and incarceration recidivism 20% to 14. And suddenly, we're lower than everybody in all 3 of those measures. So to me, that was some exciting data, having looked at this data ad nauseum, not only for the PSCC, but for grant applications where we're trying to make the case. I believe firmly that some of the changes in this county with the state funding, with other funding we've brought in, with new programs, targeting and using those evidence-based best practices are what have begun to move the needle. But I haven't done a randomized control trial to find that out. But I will tell you, the data parallels those changes.
I think it's also important to note that these are pretty easy numbers to monetize because we know for each person that doesn't return back to custody that we are saving the state X number of dollars. And at last month's PSCC meeting, we had folks come down from the Department of Corrections, which Sheriff Trapp is going to talk a little bit about. But one of the things that came up recently is we have a very successful program, the RLAN program that functions out of the jail, where we place people on short-term transitional leave at the CCC. And that program has been oversubscribed. And we are at this point where we're running out of money, so we're going to reconvene the budget committee to try and reallocate some dollars to keep that program whole through the end of the biennium. When we question, DA Perlow questioned the state about why aren't they paying for this program, because we are taking people out of DOC custody that would be serving an additional 60 days in custody if they were not able to come to the CCC. So it's really easy to draw the line. We shouldn't have to use our limited grant and aid dollars or our justice reinvestment dollars to pay for this program. So I think there's an opportunity here for us to lobby the state for additional dollars specifically for this program, given the cost savings. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. The second goal of justice reinvestment is reduce prison utilization for property, drug, and driving offenses. For that one, I looked at our one-year sum of prison months per 100,000 population. And so this is a rate for every 100,000 total population in the county. How many people, or what are our prison months for that 100,000 population? And they monitor that online monthly. So I looked at the December 2013, which is about the time the Justice Reinvestment Program began to kick into gear, and compared it to the May 2018. And for Lane County, in December, it was 3,132, and it dropped to 1,890 in May. And then for the state, you can see there wasn't that much change. It went from 1,560 to 1,300. But for Lane County, even though we're higher than the state as far as that, that number, it basically is still a 40% reduction since 2013. So, and that's because of a lot of very strong efforts in this county to lower that number. The DA's office, the sheriff's office, everybody working around that PSCC table have been targeting how do we get our numbers down to where we're appropriately sending away who needs to be going away for time in prison, but not beyond that. And then the third one is increased public safety. This is basically the percent of law enforcement agencies reporting for 2016 was 95% for Lane County and 96% for Oregon. And that's in there because that was important. There was a point in time when agencies were not reporting and the numbers just were soft, and the numbers have firmed up. And what we see across time, looking at 2012 and 2016, I kind of highlighted in the black cells the reductions in property crime rate, the reductions in the behavior crime rate, and unfortunately, our person crime rate's gone up. The numbers are much smaller, but it still has gone up. And lastly, holding offenders accountable. Our local measure for that, when we turned in our Justice Reinvestment plan, was parole and probation's positive case closure rate for people on supervision. And from January to June 2018, that rate was 71%, which is a very strong rate. And this, all of our strategies are collaborative efforts, so that's parole and probation's work, but it's also work with all of the other partners around the table. So these are just some measures that it seemed important to bring back to you, again, because they're the way, to begin with, they're good firm measures for the criminal justice system, but they're also what's been measured for justice reinvestment.
Any questions for Mr. Sowards before we?
We're running into our 10:30 time certain, so I'm going to cut questions off and ask the sheriff maybe if he can hustle through his presentation, and we're going to have to move on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Guys, when you get a half hour, you got to learn to set your presentation for 20 and allow 10 minutes for discussion, not set your presentation for 30, so. Go ahead, Sheriff.
The only quick follow-up on the data that Ms. Sauer just presented is that one thing I think is important to note is the data is in most of these sets are separated from pre-2013. And anything you see after 2013, I think there's a couple of real key contributors to those changes in the numbers. One is our jail came back online substantially more than it was, and we've seen a significant increase in prosecution from the district attorney's office on the local offenders that were contributing to some of the state prison usage, because we weren't prosecuting them locally until we had sufficient charges to send them to the state instead of utilizing the county jail. And then just in brief, I will say that we have, in years past, we were struggling a little bit with our relationship with the Department of Corrections staff in their budget office, who authorized and approved our CCA and JRI funds for Lane County. And just in the sheriff's office alone, in our corrections system, these funds fund in whole or in part programs from the actual jail beds in the jail, the Community Corrections Center, road crew, electronic surveillance, the sit-in program, community service program, and the GED education program. And most of these programs are funded below the level of the offender that we're serving, that are qualified offenders for these funds. We are in a point today where we have a much stronger relationship with the DOC. They just came down last week and spent some time with jail command staff, attended the PSCC meeting, and are very understanding and supportive of the current programs we have. So I think we've set the future in a much stronger light for Lane County, certainly the Sheriff's Office, for our CCA JRI funding. And then a real brief update on the 10-year public safety plan. This has officially been assigned and accepted by the PSCC to do an annual review and assessment of the 10-year plan, and a report back that we can provide an update on where we stand. And it made sense that the PSCC take on the public safety plan review, because the public safety plan includes partners beyond just Lane County government. It's more than the DA and parole and probation and the Sheriff's Office and youth services. We have partners in the community like sponsors and treatment and reentry service programs that weren't really at the table in the conversation with the 10-year plan when it was held internally, just as in county government partnership. So the PSCC is taking that on. We do have are in the process of scheduling, or have a scheduled soon this fall, a work group meeting, where that work group will take on the update evaluation of the 10-year plan, and we can then have a more robust report out. Last we had updated the board was that every partner in the 10-year plan had reported that they had moved and improved service levels at least to phase 2, with the one exception, which is the Sheriff's Office Police Service. There's still not a bright light on the future of where that may change, but hopefully we can stay the course with this plan and continue to address public safety as a overall plan and a broad focus as opposed to individual silos within the public safety system. So we'll hopefully have a report soon that we can share with you that comes through the PSCC effort on the 10-year plan.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to cut you guys short because I'd love to talk more about this. We're doing great work here at Lane County with the PSCC. We got one of the most highly functional public safety coordinating councils in the state. The numbers show it. What I would ask is if we could get maybe your slideshow sent to staff so they can attach it to the agenda item online so folks can see what you were discussing, as well as your two-page memo there, Susan, so we can get that online also. Because if people are watching this board meeting back, this wasn't where the public could see it, so it'd be good for the public to be able to pull it out and see the numbers we're looking at and what was highlighted in black. You know, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the general public watching if they can't go to the document and refer to that. So I really appreciate if we get the documents and get them online because it's great information. We're doing great work, amazing improvements with limited resources here in Lane County. I just can't say enough. Can't say enough about Susan either and the great work she does getting us grants, because if it weren't for some of those grants, our limited resources would be limiting some of these programs. So thank you, everybody, for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that gets us to our 10:30 time certain, about 5 minutes late. And that is a report on the Travel Lane County Performance and Program Audit. And we have Jeff Kincaid, our management analyst, and Bill Geist from DMO PROS. And I will turn it over to Jeff when he's ready.
Good morning, Chair Bozovich, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Kincaid. I'm a management analyst in county administration. I would like to start by giving a brief history of why we're here, and then I'll hand it off to Bill Geist of DMO Pros to give his performance and program audit report. So the item before you is following up on work that was initiated in October of 2015, which was when the board and Travel Lane County both accepted a county council recommendation to adopt a grant process for the allocation of TRT funds. The grant award process began with an RFQ in December of 2015, followed by the board awarding the grant in March of 2016. Lane County then sent an award letter on June 16, 2016, and Travel Lane County accepted on June 21, 2016. The terms of the grant award called for a limited performance and program audit on a not more than biennial basis by a qualified independent evaluator. The county issued an RFQ in January of 2018 and again in March of 2018 to select this evaluator. In April of 2018, DMO Pros was selected to perform the audit work. DMO Pros engaged in this audit over the summer of 2018 to produce the report attached to the board packet, which satisfies the requirement of the grant award. This brings us to today, where I'd be remiss if I didn't extend our appreciation for the work that Carrie and her staff have put forth to make this audit happening, opening their doors to allow this, and also for the many members and community members that participated in providing feedback for Bill. Now I finally have the pleasure of introducing Bill Geist. He is the president of DMO Pros. Bill has extensive experience in tourism and marketing that I would do best to just let him impress upon you. So now I'll pass it over to Bill.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff. And while we're saying thank you, I'd like to thank Jeff and Christine Moody, Carrie, and the board at Travel Lane County for all of their help in getting us integrated into the community over the past 4 or 5 months, and especially to the board of directors. We have probably performed 30 of these audits over the past 20 years of our firm, and I can tell you we have never had the level of engagement or access to information. We were able to see everything without even asking. And so we just want to say thank you for that. So to the firm DMO Pros and myself, I come from the destination marketing world. I managed 2 convention and visitor bureaus, as they once were called. They're now called destination marketing organizations. In the 80s and the 90s, finishing up that part of my career at the helm of the Greater Madison, Wisconsin Convention and Visitors Bureau. For the past 23 years, running DMO Pros, we keep a close eye on the evolution of the sector of economic development called destination marketing, as the way consumers are inspired and choosing and experiencing experience is changing rapidly. We addressed this assignment objectively and subjectively. We looked at the numbers, and we looked at the anecdotal parts of what it is that Travel Lane County does. We reviewed their performance in driving visitor business into the destination, as well as interviewing over 100 stakeholders and clients. We also received another 100 responses through online surveys, and so we have a very deep understanding of how stakeholders throughout this county view the work of Travel Lane County. We found, in a nutshell, a highly intentional and successful destination marketing organization in Travel Lane County. And so with your permission, we will click through the high points really fast. I know you want to get to your 11 o'clock time, and actually that's going to be the fun part of the presentations for you this morning, is to see the work of Travel Lane County. We looked at structure. Travel Lane County is a 501c6 nonprofit organization, as recognized by the IRS in the state of Oregon. That is fairly typical. Roughly 2/3 of all DMOs in this country use this format. There are a handful that are government departments. There are a handful that are still divisions of chambers of commerce and or economic development councils, but 501c6 has proven time and time again to be the most effective and the most nimble, and usually the most effective in generating private sector revenues to match against public sector investment of any of the formats that we see. So 501c6, they are where they should be. As far as governance goes, there is a 30-member board. Now, typical in our work, and there is no real research to this, our trade association, Destinations International, used to ask this question in their semi-annual surveys. They don't anymore. In our experience, a typical board for a DMO is between 13 and 18 people. The government, nonprofit government gurus will say that you should keep it under 10. This is a weird mutant niche of a nonprofit organization, destination marketing. One of the gurus in the space in a recent book said the American Medical Association only needs a 9-member board because they're all doctors. Well, if you take that same line of thought, a destination is so varied, so many communities, so many industries that need a voice, that frankly, a 30-member board is not a problem in a destination as diverse and as large as yours. Does it take a little more time? Yeah. A 30-member board takes a little bit more time. But what we found, honestly, as we sat in with one of the board meetings, we were very impressed at the board's dedication and their commitment. They were asking really, really good questions. They did their homework. They had reviewed the board packet ahead of time. And frankly, the board orientation book, which each board member is given upon the beginning of their term in office or on the board, clocks in at 232 pages. I mean, it's not War and Peace, but it's close. And it takes from crisis plans to ethics to explaining the budgeting process. It is probably the most extensive board orientation plan we've seen, and all available to the board through an online portal. We took a look at their revenue streams, and pretty close to the national average. We see that 87% of their budget comes from public sector, primarily hotel room tax. The average across the country is 90, and thus they have a little bit more private sector revenue, and they are to be congratulated for that, for diversifying their revenue streams, and we will encourage them in our recommendations to continue to look to the private sector to build other resources. But by and large, they're pretty much right down the line of where we would expect them to be. Membership in this organization makes up about 5% of their budget, and that is the national average. Interestingly, though, Travel Lane County has 650 members, whereas the average is somewhere around 430, which shows that most DMOs are charging a lot more for their membership than Travel Lane County is. But having 650 members in a destination this size is pretty sensational. We looked at clarity of purpose, and we were impressed with both the destination vision and the organizational vision. Destination vision is that this destination will be one of the most preferred travel destinations in the Pacific Northwest. That is aspirational and really essentially paints the picture of where this organization wants to take this destination. The organizational vision, I think, is important too, because they aspire to be a recognized leader in this industry nationwide in achieving year-round economic growth throughout Eugene, Cascades, and Coastal region through innovative destination marketing, product development, and providing exceptional visitor experiences. Interestingly, along those lines, we talked to Todd Davidson, the CEO of Travel Oregon, and this is an individual who is this year being inducted into the U.S. Travel Association's Hall of Leaders, and a couple years ago was named the State Travel Director of the Year by that same organization. So when a guy of this stature and status says that this is one of the best organizations that he's ever seen, I think that says a lot when the best calls this one of the best. So in trying to drive overnight visitation to this region, they're doing just that while, or the mission there is, the mission of Travel Lane County is to increase the number of overnight visitors to the destination. Short, sweet, and that's exactly what's happening. We're seeing very strong growth in hotel occupancy tax revenues, and while Travel Lane County, of course, cannot take credit for all of it, we believe that there's 15 to 20% of that growth and the attendant visitor spending here in this community comes from the work of Travel Lane County to inspire and book those visits. We looked at management of the organization, and we point your attention to the color code. As you see, the blue positions in leadership there all have 15 years or more of service to Travel Lane County. There's a great mix of young and veterans on this list. 22 is the current staff count at Travel Lane County. We looked at other bureaus, DMOs in this, our trade association, this sector is 2 to 5 million. Travel Lane County is 3 million. In that $2 to $5 million category, the average staff size is 15. So one could say that we're a little staff heavy here. I would counter that Travel Lane County runs 2 visitor centers. Only a half of DMOs around this country run even one. So there's a couple positions there, but each one of those people at the Visitor Information Center has another role in either social media or content development, and so they're doing double duty. Very few destination marketing organizations have a destination development director that actually helps with the vision for the future of the product and the experience that are going to be here. So that's one. And frankly, only 40% of DMOs today run a membership program, and there's 3 positions there. Most don't run a video imaging service. And so honestly, I do not find the 22 staff positions problematic. We had time to spend with staff. I found them smart, articulate, intentional. I asked them questions like, why do you do what you do? And I liked the answers I was hearing, because this is a group that uses research and creativity to move the needle. In our conversations with stakeholders, we kind of broke it out into government, clients, and then their members. Both government and clients that we talked to and received online surveys back from gave the organization high marks. Members are very impressed. Things like the Go video series, the media visits that Travel Lane County organizes to bring travel writers and producers into Lane County to actually meet the businesses that are creating these experiences. You know, enhanced visibility of social media platforms. Some of the most effusive praise, honestly, came from some of the more rural members that we did focus groups and listening sessions in Cottage Grove and Cresswell and Oak Ridge. So then looking at productivity and measurement, I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road. Oh, one last slide here on client relationships. When we asked online for the efficacy of the organization, we asked, is Travel Lane County highly effective or effective in their efforts? Those who essentially get most of their business from the leisure travel sector, this is people who come here for long weekends and week-long vacations, 83% of members said that they were highly effective or effective. 84% said that about meetings and conventions, and 94% said highly effective or effective the organization is in the sports tournament and competition role. So looking at productivity and measurement, industry standard measures are recommended by our trade association, Destinations International. There are roughly 15 to 20 measurements that are recommended. Travel Lane County is running with over 60. So they are much more intentional about asking the questions that will get to the answers of why a measure may have fallen short of expectation or goal, and conversely, why something is performing really higher than we would have expected. I'm sure Carrie will address some of these ups and downs with you specifically as she goes through the annual report in a few minutes. One of the things I think we have to keep in mind is we run in destination marketing in a really in a no control kind of environment. Unlike a product where, like Apple, who can charge over $1,000 for a phone, they control every moment of that process and everything about that product. The only thing they don't control is the economy. Well, beyond that, the DMO has really no control. And so, you know, when you see a number like earned media down this past year, but the number of travel writers up, there's no control over when that story is going to hit. That story could hit this year, it could hit next year, it might hit in 3 years, depending on the great media that was garnered last year. I mean, you know, these publications and online services can't keep saying Eugene, Cascade, and Coast over and over every single year. They're going to have to give a little time out occasionally. And so, and that was, I think, what I was most impressed with is when I would ask, okay, why is earned media down? There was an answer. Why are room night bookings down? That was an answer. You know, why are leads up? There was an answer for every one of them. And honestly, in many cases in our work, you shrug and go, I don't know. And this crew had an answer for virtually all of them, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that in a bit. So the recommendations. The only significant concern, honestly, that we heard about Travel Lane County's performance was coming from meetings hotels, those hotels that host conferences and conventions. And this is not uncommon. We hear this, you know, when business is good, it's you know, the hotels have done a good job, and when business is bad, it's the Bureau, it's the DMO's responsibility. And that's not to chastise the hotels, but that's just the way it is. Here's where I think there's a real opportunity, and Carrie and her team agree, and honestly, they've already started to open these doors. I think what has happened over the past few years is the meetings market has changed significantly. There's two reasons for this. One of them comes down to the fact that there are now third-party meeting planner services that get in between the client, the meeting planner, and the DMO. Clients now are less, it's less normal for them to share their lead with the Convention and Visitors Bureau rather than they go to the third-party for-profit groups like CVent, Helms Briscoe, and others. And so just the raw number of leads, and those leads tend to be more in the corporate and high-end categories because they have the revenue to spend with CVent and Helms Briscoe. So there are fewer leads out there, which is great because they were open leads this year. So that shows great, great work against a tide that really one would expect doesn't bode well for lead generation. However, what is happening in our conversations with the hotels, they're saying, well, the leads they're giving us are low value, low rated. So these are groups that don't want to spend $150 a night. They want to spend $89 a night, and that's really not what the hotels are looking for. So the hotel said, say, you're bringing us the wrong leads. We're bringing them more leads than ever. So this yin and yang, I think the door is open because both of those two hotels have new management in the past few months, and both of them very open to sitting down with the Travel Lane County leadership and sales department and say, okay, these are the kinds of business that we want you to chase. And Travel Lane County is all about that. So, you know, one of our recommendations is already, I think, taking root and beginning to see some value. One of them also is lost business reporting. This is a small thing, but I think it's one of the most important measures in meetings and conventions is the reason why we lost a piece of business that should have come here. We had the dates. We thought we had the rate. Why did they choose another destination? And right now, the categories that they fill out in their database are fairly broad. I don't think it gives us, chose a more attractive destination doesn't tell me why we weren't attractive. Was it rate? Was it our hotels are too spread out? Was it, we need that to probably, rather than 5 or 6 reasons for a loss, I'd like to see it more like 15, so we can really drill down. And the reason a lost business report is so important is if we see over and over and over that it's because we don't have sufficient convention space, or we have an issue with a perception that lift into the airport, traffic through the airport is not high enough to support a 2,000-3,000 person event, then that shows us we need to address that. And that's where the destination development director comes in, is to identify why we're losing and then try to mitigate that. And the only other thing really of note is we'd like them to reimagine the membership program. Membership is kind of passé. As I said, only 40% of bureaus have a membership program. Used to be 60%. Bureaus and DMOs are starting to move away from that. And here's the reason: is we don't want to inadvertently not represent, that new Belizean Icelandic fusion restaurant that just opened that the Seattle papers are gaga over. But they don't have $250 to put on the table right now because they just opened. So.
And who wouldn't want to go?
Exactly. So, and one of the things that, rather than saying that they should change the membership program, because what I really like about Travel Lane County is they say, something, if the travel writer wants to go to that restaurant, we're going to take them whether they're a member or not. We're not going to let membership get in the way of a good story. We're not going to, but we're just not going to, push them real hard. But no, we would never lose that opportunity. So what we're seeing around the country is keeping membership at a fairly low, easy base price to get into, but then sell additional services, co-op marketing, first in search on the website, additional photos, images, more video, a cooperative opportunity to both tell a better story, engage more members at a higher level, and build the Bureau's budget to be larger. And then just a quick note that because you saw all those blue squares on the org chart, we encourage the board to be really mindful and intentional about succession planning over the next 3 to 5 years. Other than that, honestly, we believe this to be one of the top 10 DMOs that we've reviewed and analyzed over the past 23 years. It was really a pleasure to get to know the staff. People ask me, do you have one more DMO in you? Are you going to jump back in at some point in time and finish your career in doing one? And I can tell you right now that over the past 23 years, I've only considered it 3 times. And that was after working with 3 really top DMOs, because I go, oh, just the creativity here is so cool. I want to be part of this family. And this is one of them. So thank you again for the opportunity. Hopefully we got a couple of minutes for questions, and really appreciated the opportunity to get to know your county. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Farr.
That's a great report. The one thing that you brought up last is the one thing that's probably the most difficult for us to address, and that is, in fact, succession planning. Carrie's been there a long time leading things, and I know, Carrie, you may talk about this when you make your presentation, but the board, many of whom are sitting in the room here today, have talked about it and thought about it a lot. How do you continue once Carrie decides to do more marathons a year? And so, that's something that, no reason to talk about it right now, but something that I know everybody sitting in this room is thinking about that.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question for you, and it really wasn't brought up during this, and I don't know so maybe what I'd like to gauge is your opinion. So I've long thought that Travel Lane County or organizations like it should be heavily involved working with economic development practitioners side by side. So if we're out talking to companies and they're interested in this area, they should be part of the equation. But yet, I think that's been lost too many times. And it has nothing to do whether Travel Lane County wants to be a part of it, because I've had enough conversations with Carrie to know that she would like to be asked or be in part of that. So in your because here's the deal. Birmingham, Alabama says they have great quality of life.
Sure.
So that's the most common narrative that there is out there when it comes to your community and trying to attract companies. It doesn't matter where you are. We have great quality of life. well, we have it here too. So my question to you is, from your background, your profession, do you believe that this should be maybe a stronger commitment from the economic development practitioners to include destination marketing organizations to be part of that? So if we're attracting company ABC, they're interested to come here, I think they'd like to know what kind of recreation activities may be available for their 20 employees, 50 employees, 1,000 employees.
And you couldn't be more right. I was talking to the director of the DMO in Irving, Texas recently, and she said 5 years ago they would send in the site selectors to look and see the specs of the land, what's the deal going to be, and do all that. She goes, this year, one of their biggest lands was, the first group in was HR, to see what the quality of life was going to be before they even let the real estate guys into the room. There's a study that's been out for about 2 years now, so it's still fairly new, by Longwoods International, one of the most trusted and respected tourism research firms in the nation. And it showed a 10 to 15% growth in interest by investors and people starting businesses towards a community that they had seen advertising for that community, and another 10 to 15% bump if the person actually acted on that inspiration and did visit. So the tourism component, which I think used to be kind of, cute, heads in beds, that's nice, we now see that there's an absolute connection between economic development and destination marketing. And to the point is, one of the things that we're seeing a number of DMOs do is start to identify what are those target markets, target industries from economic development, and then say we're going to heavy up on our chase, on our pursuit of those kinds of conventions, because if we could land 300 people in one of EDC's targets, that's the best site inspection they'll ever get.
Thank you, appreciate that, because globally we're connected by this.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Just checked, and there are no Belizean Icelandic restaurants that I can find. There's a lot of Belize restaurants in Belize. There's a lot of Icelandic restaurants in Iceland, but apparently that's a niche market available
Maybe
for
that's
us.
what I'll do next.
Quick question. We're kind of in the role of being the cheerleaders for this great organization, and they've really transitioned a lot over the last few years to what you see. And I'm curious about what you think a good role for the public administrators, the oversight, the tax collector. Really, in my view, we really have little or no role when things are going well. But you did make a couple of recommendations, like why didn't we get the business in different businesses I've been involved in. That was always a good way of critiquing what we were doing. Well, we failed. Why did we fail? Why didn't we get the business? And try to improve from that. So other than that, which was something I specifically heard, what other recommendations, and are they open to it, and what do you think our role is? Like you said, we supply 90%, or more accurately, their customers supply 90%. I just want you to know I'm listening to you guys. So, their customers supply the 90%. We have some role as government in collecting it. But what do you think is a good role for us, and what do you think is a good way, a pleasant way, a collaborative way of saying, hey, what about doing what the consultant suggested?
Well, I think it's just that. I think it's holding them to a high standard, because they deserve to be held to a high standard. This is not some fluff organization. This is real dollars. This is quality of life. And this, positions us on the world stage, and you will be on the world stage in a few years again. I think it's supporting what they do, and knowing that board of directors that is currently at the helm, they're on the case. They're watching, and I think you can trust that some of the market shifts that you may see them make in the next couple of years may be counterintuitive, or may not line up with old school destination marketing, but you've got some great minds, and I think it's encouraging them, but questioning. I mean, if it comes to pass that maybe there's a whole new way of doing meetings and convention sales, and we suggested that there is another option out there. If the board chooses to go that way, I would hope that you could support that, even though it may initially not look like it's the way it's supposed to be done.
Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I'd just like to say thank you, Travel Lane County, for the great work you do. Bringing people to our area, it's very fortunate for them that you're in place, because we truly do live in one of the greatest places, if not the greatest place on God's green earth. And thank you, sir. I appreciated our time together a month or so ago. That was a great experience, and based on what came out of that piece, the conclusions that have been brought to us today were borne out when we had that initial conversation. My sense was that that was typical of the conversations taking place throughout the region. So thank you for that, and thank you, Travel Lane County folks.
So we're past our time certain here, so I'll be brief also. Just want to say that, you know, one of the things that changed in the last several years has been to change how we fund Travel Lane County. As we realized, you know, we weren't quite meeting all statutes relative to the use of public funds, which transient room taxes, you know, once they come to us, are a public fund. Even though it is kind of a self-taxing by the industry that the industry agreed to, specifically hoping to have a certain amount placed into destination marketing. But this audit is part of that transparency in that, and what I really appreciate is almost the very first thing you said, which is you've never had an organization present their data so willingly and openly and without even requesting, and that transparency that Travel Lane's providing. I really appreciate that, and the board's willingness to work with you as the auditor. I know this is kind of a new process. We've never done it before here, having this outside look in, and the whole idea of the grant and the renewing and extending of the grant has been a new process for us in Travel Lane. But I think this provides the public a sense that these dollars are being used really well. And I had the feeling that Travel Lane was one of the top destination marketing places in the country. It's great to hear that confirmed by an outside person and a professional such as yourself, and the public can hear that we're really got a great organization marketing this area. And I agree with Commissioner Lycan. There is such an interconnectedness between destination marketing and economic development. You know I came here originally for a vacation and ended up moving here. So definitely, they are connected. And I think at that time I used what was then CVALCO to find information about the area once I was here. So,
yeah,
which was the earlier edition of Travel Lane County. So, really appreciate the audit. Really appreciate the information.
Thank you.
And I think it's a great transition into our next item, which will be the annual report. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll move on to item E of County Administration, which is the annual report from Travel Lane County. And thank you for being patient, even though we're 7 minutes late.
No worries. Thank you for having us, and thanks for putting these two presentations together. I thought it might make it easier for you to be able to just focus in over a solid block of time and not knowing when the agenda was set what was going to come out of the third-party performance audit. I feel really good about making that suggestion. So first, would like to just orient you as to who all is in the room with us. We've got several members of our staff team and members of our board. We have Lori Norman, who is our current board chair. Here we have at the back of the room Julie Johns from Territorial Seed in Cottage Grove, who serves on our executive committee, Dana Terrell of the Terrell Group. Next to Dana is a staff member, Juanita Metzler, who's our convention sales manager. And over on this side, we've got Mike Drennan, a retired banker who's been on our board. He was on the board when I got here. Richard Boyles of Insight Hotel Management, who served on the Lane County Committee to select the third-party performance auditor. Richard's a past chair. Mayor Christine Lundberg, who serves on the exec committee. Pam White, our treasurer. Robert Kanega, our past chair of Robert Kanega Gallery. Our newest senior member of our team, Denise Ray, is our new Director of Finance and Operations. Then Natalie Inoue, who you all know, our VP of Tourism Marketing, Janice Ross, our VP of Convention and Sports Marketing, and the Executive Director of Eugene, Cascades, and Coast Sports Commission, Sally McAleer, our VP of Integrated Marketing, who got to travel Lane County a month before I did, and then Andy Vabora, our VP of Stakeholder Relations. As I jump into the report, I do want to acknowledge the work that Bill Geist and Terry White did of DMO Pros. It is a big destination. It's a complex organization. They spend a lot of time in market. They were here for a week. I'm not sure they spend that much time in market when they do their third-party performance audits typically, but they really did spend an extraordinary amount of time, and we appreciate their thoroughness and the recommendations that they've brought forward. We'll process those recommendations through the Board of Directors. We will provide you updates as we go along so that you know how we're tracking against those recommendations, and we just really want to express our appreciation to them. And I'd also like to thank the board and the staff. Every member of our staff team spent somewhere between 1 and 3 hours with Bill and Terry in staff stakeholder interviews, and then our board spent time, and some of you spent time as well. So we really appreciate everyone who is involved in this rigorous process. My list of improvements might be a little longer than Bill's. As you know, when you go through a third-party assessment, you spend a lot of time rolling around on your pillow thinking about what you might do better, so you might just see a major spike in activity on the basis of all the adrenaline that I've been expending over the last few months. So, FY18 was actually a better year than anticipated in many ways. We didn't hit every single goal that we set forth in the year. We did hit many of them. We exceeded some of them. One of the goals that we exceeded was our membership goal. We set a goal of 5%. We actually grew membership 8.2%. Those 657 member relationships are really important to us. They are spread out throughout the county and across the public and private sectors, and they help us organize the data and know what we're responsible for keeping current on our platforms. Preparing and presenting our annual report is always a bit of a challenge because we tend to have one foot in the present and one foot in the future, and this is a time when we have to pivot and kind of look back. And one thing that's true throughout that time continuum, and that you are feeling as well as us, I know, is what an incredible time we are in terms of opportunity for new infrastructure additions to the destination. And this long list of projects that we're all tracking will really have the opportunity to strengthen our quality of life and our competitiveness and experience delivery as a visitor destination. Many of these projects will have a significant impact on our ability to grow visitor spending and positively impact the economy for decades to come. Throughout FY18, we actively supported or tracked the progress of these projects and several more, and our plan is to provide some live links to each of these projects, so as the public clicks through to our annual report, they'll be able to actually get to some details on all of these projects. Visitor spending and related jobs showed continued growth in the program year, and our overall estimated program ROI, which is based only on those programs that we can really legitimately estimate visitor spending returns on, came in at $20 for each dollar of TRT invested. As you know, 3 more hotels were completed during the program year. And on a calendar basis, which is how we track Smith Travel Research hotel data, Eugene room supply is up 8.5% January through August, and Springfield 1% compared to last year. We went into FY18 a little bit nervous. FY17 was an all-time record year. It started with the hosting of an Olympic track and field trials in July, blew the roof off, a 1-month room tax collection. And so as we started to look ahead to FY18 going into the year, we knew it was going to be difficult to generate a replacement for that huge mega event. And we also had some concern, while we're super excited about all these hotels, that much new supply means competition in market, and we were worried about average daily rate dropping and our ability to drive overall revenue growth. We knew that existing hotels were going to feel the competition of that new product coming on. Do you want to start with the video? Is it going to go? Maybe, maybe not. So with a little bit of help from the solar eclipse last August, you know, when we went into FY18, we saw July results. We were in the tank following that year with the Olympic trials, and we were pretty worried. The solar eclipse that took place in August of 2017 actually compressed a ton of business outside the path of totality and really helped get us right back on track. And then we saw good room demand generation and growth throughout the remainder of the year, with TRT hitting another all-time record for FY18, $12.2 million. So overall, TRT increased 5.2%. Florence was up 12.13%. Rural Lane County, all those areas outside the 4 local jurisdictions that have a local city tax, were up 9.85%. Eugene was up almost 8%. Cottage Grove had a tougher time. Cottage Grove saw collections go down 7.2%, and Springfield was off 3% for the program year as we saw market share shift to the other side of the freeway with all those new hotels coming on. The good news is July collections for Cottage Grove were up 38%. It might be some of that revenue should have been in June and should have been part of FY18 collections, but in any case, we saw a good uptick in July in Cottage Grove, and overall for the entire county, July was up another 8%, so we're off to a very good start in FY19. The breakdown on this page is really to help you get a look at those cities that have direct local TRT collections, what they bring in from those, and then the dollars that attribute to us through the 2.1 points versus the remainder of that money that you have to give to other recipients. So that top number, that 4.5, is what you've got beyond what you allocate to us. It goes to the fairgrounds, it goes to parks, it goes to rural communities, it goes into your economic development fund for tourism-related projects. Our total budget is just over $3 million, and we're probably around 4th in the state. Haven't looked it up recently. I don't know exactly. We know Travel Portland's way out in front, $23 million annual budget. We know both Washington County and Clackamas County have $4+ million budgets, and we know that the Greater Portland region, which is one of those 7 regions funded by Travel Oregon, is well above us too. But we're at about $3 million, and this chart gives you a sense as to how that money comes in and how it goes back out. Now you see a little bit different number here on the TRT at 83%, and that's because our visitor guide and our dining guide are self-funded programs. We used to pay for them. We used to have to allocate TRT to those publications, but our stakeholders pay for the production costs of those through advertising revenue. So while the money doesn't come to us directly, it comes into the overall cooperative marketing program and back out, and that actually makes our revenue share a little bit better in terms of about 83% of our total funding coming from TRT when you account for those publications. We have been sharing with you over the last couple of years our ramping up in photography, video capture and production, and the sharing of our libraries. We've provided a couple of screens detailing shot locations. You've got some details in the report, and we really want to encourage the public to visit our website and our YouTube channel that connects off of that website. Ours is a large destination, and to effectively serve all of our and your stakeholders, it's important to integrate storytelling as a primary function and maintain a very content-rich website. While we didn't hit our ambitious goal of 10% growth in site visits in FY18, we saw other DMOs site statistics drop as much as 30%. Central Oregon was off 28.5% at mid-year. And we worked every lever we could, including partnering with Google on capturing 360 video and helping with posting to community Google pages. We were off 3% for the year for FY18, but we're happy to say our web visits are up 3% for the first 2 months of this current year. We've produced a number of community videos with more to follow, and we brought the Florence video to share, which I'm hoping is going to work. We'll see. Okay, you're not going to see it, but it is on our website, so you can see it there, and that'll save us a minute and a half.
My cousin from England spent 2 days in Florence last week.
On the basis of that video, I'm certain.
That's why he came to America.
Okay. We added Eugene, Springfield, and Junction City to our award-winning GO campaign in FY18, and we've completed Veneta, Cresswell, and Coburg already in this program year. This slide also speaks to our work with media and travel trade and our partnership with the Eugene Symphony on the Mackenzie Four Seasons concert that was performed last February. We leverage regional marketing programs, the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, the Willamette Valley Visitors Association, as well as Travel Oregon. And one of the Willamette Valley Visitors Association's initiatives was an in-airport display in San Jose featuring Oregon wine country, and you kind of see that in that photo on the lower left. It's currently at the Eugene Airport, just outside of the TSA checkpoint. Programs that you are familiar with continued in FY18, and we're close to launching an online app for the Ale Trail, the Pinot Bingo Wine Trail, and a local distilled spirits trail. This should greatly enhance tracking, as we won't be relying on folks to complete a passport and redeem it. Just this weekend, Meg Trendler on our team saw 3 Pinot Bingo passports get stamped at Iris Vineyards, so happy that, I don't know if Richard's still here, but the chatter that she overheard from those folks wasn't about really the redemption of the passport as much as using it as a tool to get out to vineyards that folks had not seen before. So we're excited to get the app launched. We can track people more in real time in terms of where they're going. At our visitor industry celebration, we recognize Sand Dunes Frontier as our destination award winner. You all know that they have suffered a fire, and we were really touched. They reached out to us within a week of that fire. Chuck Chapman did, and noted the loss of his destination award and asked if there was a way that we could create another one for him. And in all of the devastation and all of the chaos that he was dealing with, the meaningfulness of that award sort of shone through for him. And so I wanted to share that story with you. We're certainly wishing them the best as they recover from that fire. Part of our focus on storytelling is getting the stories into meaningful channels once they're produced. We continue to grow our social following, and we are also implementing a frontline service training program. It's a statewide program that we're implementing here in Lane County. Thomas Moser on our team is a certified trainer, and we are thrilled to recognize Driftwood Shores for getting its entire frontline team trained. Frontline training is going to continue to be a point of emphasis for us all the way to and through Oregon 21, as it is one of our legacy program initiatives as we prepare to host the World that year. Convention advertising performed well in delivering audience to our meeting site in FY18, with sessions to that section of our site up 5%. We also invest in the third-party channels that deliver leads, as you heard from Bill, Helms Briscoe, and Cvent, so that the destination is well represented, and those direct leads to hotels that you heard Bill speak about are supported with destination content. The moving components that you see throughout this presentation deck are incorporated into our online meetings and sports guides with a target audience of planners. This will change how we track engagement, as these guides are not downloaded but watched online. They offer our supporting advertisers a lot more opportunity, and they allow us to incorporate slideshows and video. We did not hit our FY18 goals, but did finish ahead of FY17 on conventions and room nights booked, delegates, and leads produced for meetings. We have faced a real challenge with market conditions the last few years in the face of record high room rates for leisure travel, making it very difficult to secure convention room blocks. New general managers have arrived at both convention hotels just as all those new hotel rooms opened, and it sounds like we do have an opportunity to reestablish a collaborative focus on booking conventions. As investments in our conference hotels continue, hopefully it will become easier to secure the right negotiated rates that they want. They want higher rates, and it's a competitive business, and we need those investments in the product to make us competitive with other destinations. Earned media for meeting planner targets was up over 200% from FY17. On the sports side, we're thrilled to have the honor of hosting the 2020 Olympic team trials for track and field, but as you know, the event did not confirm until the current program year. We missed our FY18 bookings goal for sports, but it sure did bounce up this program year. We're up 1,400% year-to-date with the trials landing in July. And while earned media for sports was down, as we were comparing ourselves to a year where we had an Olympic trials, and so earned media during an Olympic trials year is a huge spike every time we're lucky enough to host one. The meaningfulness, though, of our earned media was fabulous. We've been positioning our staff as industry experts, and they pen articles on topics such as utilizing your CVB and Sports Commission, how to keep volunteers engaged, the importance of facilities to attract and use sports, and these appear in trade publications like Sports Destination Magazine and Sports Travel Magazine. And in addition to articles that were penned by our staff and published, Janice Ross was featured in several articles in FY18 as a leader in the National Sports Commission industry. The Sports Commission once again hosted a successful midwinter educational summit and the spring Sportstown Awards featuring the prep athletes of the year. Levi Silbernagel, I hope I'm saying that correctly, from Junction City, and Jordan Warmdahl from North Eugene were selected from high schools from throughout the entire county, as well as watching us honor a variety of sports events from youth to adult. The youth team this year, the youth team of the year, was the East Lane Little League Pink Rebels. And they were flippin' adorable and very enthusiastic in getting their award. The adult team of the year was also a women's team, and it was Team Emerald, a roller derby team, and I am not kidding you, they were on crutches when they came up to get their award. Eugene Marathon was recognized as Sustainable Event of the Year, and Eugene Emeralds won Sports Promotion of the Year, and what a phenomenal job they've done in promoting and playing baseball, too.
Winning the title, right.
The mascot was Will High's Wolverine, and Trainer of the Year was Mari Gibson from Marist. Inspirational Coach of the Year was Chuck Hoffman from Springfield High School, and Athlete was Sterling Miner from Thurston. A really, really fabulous event, and my thanks to the Sports Commission for putting that on. In addition to marketing existing experiences in the Eugene, Cascades, and Coast region to visitors, our team at Travel Lane County collaborates on, supports, advocates, or sometimes even leads initiatives to strengthen Lane County as a place to live, work, play, and visit. We were thrilled when the Mackenzie Scenic Byway official designation finally came through after 15 years of work by stakeholders along the Mackenzie corridor. We just celebrated Savor Springfield on Friday with an incredible, boisterous crowd, including Mayor Christine Lundberg, who was just sipping beer out of the largest beer stein I have ever seen. We've been grabbing video of the cultural art scene in downtown Eugene this summer and fall and have a video in the works. We worked on the new Oak Ridge Westford website by leading the committee, providing copy and photos, and creating a video. We also supported the city of Oak Ridge in slightly modifying its official logo. We are helping coordinate a series of workshops called the South Willamette Culinary and Agritourism Studio. It started with a focus on rural Lane County from Junction City to Coburg to Fern Ridge, along with Harrisburg and Monroe, but it's been expanding with trails going as far as Iris Vineyards, as well as up the Mackenzie corridor. We continue to work on Connect Lane, the identification and signage of cycling routes between our smaller communities. And we continue to work, to Commissioner Lyken's point earlier, with Sarah Means, the chambers, the cities, Lane Workforce Partnership, and the state on regional economic development initiatives and targeted industry sector strategies focused on high-tech, food and beverage manufacturing, and advanced wood products. And we are right on mission with this work as we work with representatives from the sectors to bid on NOMCON, the Nation of Makers Conference, and with the food and beverage sector to bid on a beer-related conference. We are helping not only to market the destination, but to develop the destination in ways that are compatible with community values and also provide exceptional visitor experiences. Our work with the Dunes Restoration Collaborative is another great example. And currently we are hosting a rare AmeriCorps staff person, Jeff Malik, who is helping staff this effort. This weekend is the annual Solve Beach Cleanup, and we encourage residents to head over to Florence, where 3 sites are being coordinated. In FY18, we welcomed San Diego direct service, but lost our San Jose flights, which we hope come back to us. They seem to have performed well, and we're holding out a hope for a return of that service. We suspect there may have been some systemic issues that caused us to lose that service as opposed to how that route was performing. We all saw bike share get off to a record start in Eugene, and as you know, we just welcomed rideshare thanks to a lot of work by the City of Eugene, the Eugene Chamber, and the Technology Association of Oregon. Work also continues on regaining that Amtrak stop in Oak Ridge. You may recall that our bylaws and board structure were revised in the mid-90s in collaboration with your Lane County staff and the 2 metro cities. As Bill indicated earlier, we have 30 voting members on our board, both with geographic representation across the county and also private industry segments and local government representation. I want to recognize also the community leaders who form our Sports Advisory Council, which is going into retreat tomorrow to talk about how to use this incredible opportunity of hosting Oregon 21 as a way to position the destination for other sporting events before, during, and after 2021. And I do want to acknowledge the staff team at Travel Lane County, each member of which is dedicated to both industry and community success in attracting and hosting visitors. I want to specifically call out our VP of Integrated Marketing, Sally McAleer, who will be retiring from full-time work around the end of the calendar year. Sally has dedicated 22 years in helping us market the destination, and she's been particularly instrumental in keeping us on the front edge of the technology curve. We are often seen as overachievers for our budget size, and we owe this in large part to Sally. She has promised to stay on for a while in a part-time capacity to mentor her replacement, and we are very, very appreciative of that. And then before I turn it over to our board chair to close, I just do want to lob out that formal request for consideration of a 1-year extension of our formal grant agreement, which would take us to June 30th of 2021. I'll kind of hang here while you hear from Lori in case you have any follow-up questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board. As you can see by Carrie's presentation, Travel Lane County has accomplished a tremendous amount in the last year. As board chair, I'd like to personally thank Carrie and the entire staff of Travel Lane County for their hard work and their dedication. I'd also like to thank DMO Pros for their time in conducting the performance audit. With the access of information that Carrie and the staff gave to the audit, I'm confident that the strong performance of Travel Lane County, as well as the suggested improvements, are thoroughly reflected in the audit by DMO Pros. As mentioned, Travel Lane County has a strong and engaged board, and we are committed to the implementation of the recommendations of the audit. I would ask the Board of Commissioners to give staff direction as to the timing of the next audit. Due to the strong performance, evaluation, and the demands of Travel Lane County ahead of the World Games, I would like to suggest a minimum of 5 years. In addition, I would also like to formally request a 1-year extension to the Travel Lane County grant agreement to June 30th of 2021. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or comments? Commissioner Farr.
Just a quick comment, and that is that between your board, also on the board is Corey Butler, who is our fair manager, and on your ex officio staff or board is Steve Mokrahewski and Sarah Means both. So Lane County is well represented on your board, both in the voting members and on ex officio. So
we appreciate that investment of time too. We know schedules are busy, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Just want to really appreciate the great work you're doing. I think, between the audit and the presentation, you kind of maybe overwhelmed us where we don't have a lot of questions because there was so much information presented. But again, you guys are doing great work. Really appreciate what you guys do for the county in the way of economic development. And I also just want to appreciate the work on the Dunes Collaborative. I have a really interest in that as something that started out as a problem when the U.S. Forest Service was actually going to close down parts of the dune in their 10C management plan. And I kind of stepped in and pitched a fit along with some folks from Douglas County and Coos County, and it actually turned into the meetings that led to the formation of the collaborative. You know, that was back in 13, I think, when they proposed that those area closures to vehicles out in the dunes. And people don't understand that those dunes provide over $100 million annually to the Central Coast economy. And that estimate was done many years ago by OSU. So that's such a vital piece of our tourism economy and such a huge attraction. And I know that, you know, a lot of the video on your site happens to be people out on the dunes. So.
We took our board out on the dunes. We just had our last board meeting at Driftwood Shores, and so we took the opportunity to take the board out on the dunes, some of whom hadn't been out there before, and it is so spectacular.
Yeah, I hadn't been out in a vehicle before we started the meetings, and we actually got a tour in one of those giant buggies with the folks that were meeting as part of the precursor to the collaborative, when we had brought together the Dunes Riders Association, some environmental groups and all that, talk about the issues with European beach grass and the long-term health of that ecosystem, and how much that work to eliminate beach grass and some of the other invasives will benefit not only this whole OHV and the visitors portion of it, but the whole ecosystem side with the snowy plover and the pink viburnum and a bunch of other species that are dependent on moving sand. And that European beach grass gets rid of moving sand. So it's really such an important collaborative to continue that work on that restoration to save the dunes, because they were going away. And just such a big piece of our economy. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you so much. I'll just take just a second to say, number one, thank you not only to the staff at Travel Lane County, but also, I mean, there's a lot of volunteer energy on your board of directors, and you guys in particular could be doing other things, and this is really appreciated that you're you know, the leaders of the organization and the backbone of the board of directors. But the public component is important too, and Mayor Lundberg is here. I think it's really important that we, as leaders, public leaders, that we really look forward to not the success of the 2021, because that is a given, right? We're going to look forward to the 2021. But the big thing is, what can we do during the time between now and the end of the 21 to be ready for something else, so that we don't see a big drop off. I mean, we will see a drop off, but so we don't see a very big drop off. And when leaders can play a role in trying to figure out, well, what's 2022 going to look like? You know, what are we really going to try to pitch to the thousands of visitors that'll be here in 2021? What are we going to pitch? And, you know,
I'm privileged to serve as the co-chair of the steering committee for Oregon 21, and our first couple of steering committees, which has representation from Lane County and the city of Springfield and the city of Eugene, as well as others in the state, have really been focused on long-term legacy projects. So projects that will enhance us as a destination host, but will enhance the community after the event is gone. And you're seeing examples of it really abound on that early list that was on the intro slide. Everything from the eWeb Riverfront development and the steam plant project. Springfield has some really great projects on the docket as well. Things that are kind of permanent additions to the community that will serve us well as residents who live here, but also position us well into the future. So as we kind of get polished up for Oregon 21, everyone's maintaining a mindset of community focus, community improvement, long-term legacy that makes us shine in 21, but serves us beyond. And the Sports Commission retreat tomorrow, Commissioner Sorensen, is right on point for for the very challenge that you're raising. That's their focus. How do we use this event? We want to serve this event well, but we also want to leverage the fact that we are hosting this event to drive business before, during, and after for long-term economic impact. So it's a very, very valid point that you're making.
and for the people coming in 2021, you know, stay an extra day.
That's right. Yep.
Commissioner Farr.
Mr. Chair, two things. One, Sally, Great work. I didn't know you were here before, Carrie. I did not know that. The second is you guys don't ask for much, but today you're asking ask us to consider a one-year extension of the grant agreement, and I'd like to ask for a head nods among the board to ask staff to prepare a one-year extension for the grant agreement.
It comes to us annually. In some format.
It does, and this is the time that you have an opportunity to ask for it, and in fact, you both did. And Laura, you asked for a 5-year. Let's see, is regarding
For the performance audit.
Performance audit, okay.
Correct.
So, guide me in a question on that one.
Pardon me?
What should I ask for?
That it not happen prior to
5 years.
5
okay.
years.
I think we'll just. I don't think we need to take action on that, but I think that's probably a given at this point in time. But so with the head nods, Mr. Chair, I see Mr. Rickoff writing down the request for the one-year grant extension. Thank you.
We'll make sure we capture that at the end of the meeting under.
When the board chair meets, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to the board and staff for attending.
See you all at Shadow Hills.
So that gets us down to Commissioner's business announcements and agenda team requests. We need to get an exec session in before lunch, so I would like to push this off till after we finish our afternoon item. Commissioner.
Do we have any estimate of how long that executive session will be?
We have 2 items. One's really short, I think, so I think we should be able to finish up by lunchtime if we can go ahead and get into it.
Commissioner Sorensen, yes, we should be able to fit those in within 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Visiting me at noon, so.
If we move with the LAC ready.
Yeah, so with that, I would like to say we're getting ready to recess and reconvene an executive session up in the Board of Commissioners conference room. We will recess after that and come back into regular session at 1:30 in Harris Hall. The Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions and to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602E and H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions will be made in executive session, and we will be coming back out in a regular session at 1:30 in Harris Hall. We are recessed and will reconvene in the Board of Commissioners conference room.